Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I grew up on a 480-acre plot of land outside Hays, Kansas. It's so flat that you can watch a storm forming 20 miles away and finish your work before it hits. My name is Clint Hargrove, and I grow corn and wheat on the land my grandfather worked in 1947. I know every irrigation line, every low spot that holds water after rain, and every fence post that should be replaced but never is. I'm not one to tell meaningless stories. What happened to me in the fall of 2021 has no meaning I can explain. But it happened, and I'm writing it here because someone needs to know what happened. It was the second week of October. Harvest was done, and I was running the disc harrow across the North 40 to turn the stubble under before the ground froze. The work is loud, repetitive, and mostly mindless. You set your line, watch your depth, and let the tractor do the heavy lifting. I like it that way. Gives me time to think or not think, depending on the day. The sun had gone down around 6:30, and I kept the tractor rolling with the work lights on. The plan was to finish the section by 9 o'clock, clean up, and head home. Joanne Pierce, my neighbor to the west, had texted me earlier asking if I'd seen anything odd near the property line. She raises cattle and keeps night watch during calving season, even though it was past that time of year. I told her no and thought it was strange she'd ask, but Joanne's the type to notice details most people miss. By 8:45, I was 3 passes from done. The air had gone cold fast, the way it does on clear nights when there's no cloud cover to hold the warmth. I could see my breath in the cab even with the heater running. The radio was set to a classic country station out of Salina, playing low enough that I could hear the engine and the harrow teeth scraping rock when they hit it. Then the radio cut to static. Not the soft kind you get when you drift between stations. This was a hard snap, like someone flipped a switch. I reached for the dial, and that's when I felt it, a pressure in my chest. Not pain, not tightness, just a low hum that made my ribs feel like they were touching something electric. I looked up through the windshield and saw it. A light, circular, about the size of a 2-car garage, hanging maybe 200 feet above the center of my field. It wasn't a spotlight. Spotlights have a source, a beam you can trace back to a helicopter or a tower. This thing just existed, flat and uniform, like someone had cut a hole in the night and filled it with pale white light that didn't spill beyond its edges. It didn't move, it didn't flicker, it didn't make a sound. I killed the tractor and the work lights in one motion, and the dark came back so fast my eyes burned trying to adjust. The circle stayed. I could see the corn stubble underneath it lit up like it was noon, but the light didn't reach my tractor 80 yards away. The edge of the lit area was a perfect line. On one side, daylight. On the other, night. I've seen Aurora Borealis once in my life on a trip to Montana. That was soft and waved. This was geometric and still. I sat there with my hand on the key, telling myself to start the engine and drive, but my body wouldn't move. Not out of fear. Out of something else. Curiosity mixed with a kind of paralysis I'd never felt before. It was like my brain knew it was seeing something it shouldn't, and all the circuits that control motion just shut down. The hum in my chest got stronger. I could feel it in my jaw, in my teeth, in the bones of my hands gripping the wheel. It climbed in pitch, not loud, just persistent, like standing too close to a power transformer. Then the light started to pulse. Slow at first, 1 beat every 5 seconds. Then faster. I counted 7 pulses before it stopped and went steady again. That broke the spell. I fumbled for my phone in the cup holder and dialed Joanne. She answered on the first ring. "Clint? I need you to look north from your porch," I said. My voice came out thinner than I expected. Hold on. I heard her boots on wood, a screen door creak, then silence. Jesus, Clint, what is that? I don't know. Can you see it from there? Clear as day, it's just sitting there. You under it? No, I'm about 80 yards south in the tractor. It's over the middle of the field. You need to get out of there. I'm trying. The line went strange. Her next words came through broken. Clint, move now. Say again. Get home. Call, sheriff. Then the call dropped. I looked at my screen. No signal. I had 4 bars when I dialed her, now I had none. I pocketed the phone and reached for the key. The engine turned over once, coughed, and died. I tried again, same thing. The battery was good. I'd replaced it in June. The fuel was clean. There was no reason for it to stall, but it wouldn't catch. I sat in the dark cab with the smell of diesel and dust and cold metal, watching that circle of light just hang there like it had all the time in the world. Then it moved. Not across the field. It dropped, fast and smooth, no wobble, no adjustment, straight down until it was maybe 10 feet above the stubble. The ground underneath turned orange. Not fire orange, a dull rust color, like old iron heating up. I could see steam rising from the dirt, thin wisps curling into the light. The temperature inside the cab spiked. I felt sweat break across my forehead and under my arms, even though seconds ago I'd been cold. The windshield fogged at the edges. I wiped it with my sleeve and kept watching because I didn't know what else to do. 3 shapes stepped out of the light. I don't know how else to say it. They didn't climb down a ladder. They didn't repel. They just appeared at the edge of the lit circle and moved onto the ground. They were small, maybe 4.5 feet tall, with narrow builds and long arms that swung low when they walked. Their heads were too large for their bodies, smooth and round, no hair. No features I could make out from that distance. They moved in a line, evenly spaced, each step deliberate like they were measuring the ground. No stumbling, no hesitation. They walked to the center of the circle, stopped, and turned to face my direction in unison. I stopped breathing. I know that sounds dramatic, but I'm not exaggerating. My lungs just stopped pulling air. My hand was still on the key, frozen there, and all I could do was watch those 3 shapes stand in formation, backlit by that rust-orange glow. They didn't wave. They didn't signal. They just stood there for what felt like a full minute, but was probably closer to 15 seconds. Then they turned, walked back to the center, and the light snapped off. Not faded, not dimmed. It was there. And then it wasn't. The field went black. The hum stopped. The pressure in my chest released so fast I gasped and sucked in air like I'd been underwater. I cranked the key. The engine fired on the first try. I threw it in gear, spun the tractor in a tight circle, and drove straight for the farm road without looking back. My work lights carved a narrow path through the dark, and I kept my eyes on that path like my life depended on it. Maybe it did. I don't know. When I hit the gravel and turned toward home, I checked the rear view. The field was empty, just flat black ground and stars. I didn't slow down until I reached my driveway. Joanne's truck was already parked by my barn when I rolled in. She was standing by the driver's side door with her arms crossed, breath misting in the cold. I killed the engine and climbed down. My legs shook. I leaned against the tire for a second to steady myself. "You okay?" she asked. "No." "What did you see?" I told her. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she nodded once. I saw the light from my place. Couldn't make out details, but I saw it drop and turn orange. Then it went out. I tried calling you back. Line was dead. Mine, too. Soon as that thing showed up, my phone went to 0 bars. You think it was military? If it was, They've got gear I've never heard of, and they don't move like that." We stood there in the cold for a while, not saying much. Eventually, she asked if I was going to call the sheriff. I told her I didn't know what I'd say that wouldn't sound insane. She said she'd back me up if I did. I appreciated that, but I still didn't call. What was I going to report? A light, some shapes, and a tractor that stalled. They'd write it down, maybe drive out in the morning, find nothing, and file it under "Farmer saw something weird at night." I've lived here long enough to know how that conversation goes. Joanne left around 11. I went inside, poured a bourbon I didn't finish, and sat at the kitchen table with my phone. I had signal again. Full bars. I pulled up the weather radar, the FAA site, anything that might explain what I saw. Clear skies. No flight activity logged over Ellis County after 8 p.m. No storm systems. No military exercises reported. I shut the laptop and went to bed, but I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those three shapes standing in the orange glow, turning to face me like they knew exactly where I was. The next morning, I drove back to the field with a thermos of coffee and a sick feeling in my gut. The sun was up, the air was clean, and everything looked normal. I parked at the edge where I'd been working and walked out to the center. It took me 10 minutes to find it. A circle, maybe 30 feet across, where the ground had changed. The dirt was darker, almost black, and when I crouched down and touched it, the texture was wrong. It wasn't soil anymore, it was something between soil and glass, hard, smooth, with a faint shine when the light hit it right. I dug my knife in and scraped. The surface didn't chip. It just made a thin scratch. Underneath, the color faded back to normal dirt about an inch down. I took a sample in a plastic bag and drove to the AG Extension office in Hayes. I know a soil scientist there, a woman named Dr. Ellen Moss, who's helped me with pH tests and nutrient profiles over the years. I handed her the bag and asked if she could tell me what happened to it. She looked at it under a scope, ran a few quick tests, and called me back 3 days later. "Clint, where'd you get this?" "My north field. Why?" "The surface layer has been exposed to extreme heat. I'm talking over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. But here's the strange part. It didn't burn. It fused. The silica in the soil melted and rehardened. That takes a very specific kind of heat applied very fast. You run a flamethrower out there?" "No." "Controlled burn that got away from you?" "No. I was disking, that's it." She paused. "Then I don't know what to tell you. This sample looks like it was hit with a plasma torch or something industrial. But there's no residue, no carbon scoring, no fuel traces, just heat." I thanked her and didn't explain further. What was I going to say? A UFO did it? She'd think I lost my mind. I drove home, parked in the barn, and stood there staring at my tractor for a long time. The engine was fine, the battery was fine, everything worked, but I knew what I saw, and I knew that circle in my field didn't make itself. 2 weeks later, Joanne called me at 2 a.m. I answered with my heart already pounding because nobody calls at that hour unless something's wrong. "It's back," she said. "Where?" "My west pasture. Same light, same everything. I'm looking at it right now." "Stay inside." "I am, but Clint, my cattle are going crazy. They're running the fence line, crashing into each other. I've never seen them like this." "I'm coming over." I threw on jeans and a jacket and took my truck. Joanne's place is a quarter-mile west. I made it in under 2 minutes. When I pulled up her driveway, I could see the light from the road. It was bigger this time, maybe twice the size, and it was hovering over her pasture near the creek. The same flat, white glow with hard edges. The hum hit me as soon as I stepped out of the truck. I felt it in my chest, my jaw, the base of my skull. Joanne was on her porch with a rifle across her lap, not aiming it, just holding it like it gave her something solid to grip. "How long's it been there?" I asked. 10 minutes, maybe 15. It dropped lower twice. Each time the cattle lost their minds. I looked at the pasture. In the glow from the light, I could see maybe 40 head of Angus running in a tight circle near the far fence. They were bellowing, a sound I've heard 1,000 times, but never like this. This was panic, pure animal panic. One of them hit the fence hard enough that I heard the wire snap from 200 yards away. "We need to call someone," I said. "And tell them what? They'll think we're drunk or crazy." "I don't care. This is the second time. That's not a coincidence." Before she could answer, the light pulsed. Once, twice, 3 times. Each pulse was brighter than the last, and with each one, the hum climbed. On the 3rd pulse, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. The screen was scrambled, lines of static running horizontal across it like an old TV that lost signal. Then it went black. Dead. No power, no response. I looked at Joanne. Her phone was on the porch rail. Same thing. Black screen. The light dropped to the 20 feet above the grass. The ground underneath turned orange again, that same dull rust color, and steam rose in thick columns. Then shapes appeared. 5 of them this time. Taller than the ones I'd seen before, maybe 5.5 feet, but the same narrow build, the same long arms. They moved out of the light in a line and spread across the pasture. The cattle broke formation and stampeded toward the barn. I heard hooves pounding, fence posts cracking, and then silence. Not quiet. Silence. The kind where even the wind stops. The shapes kept moving. Slow, methodical, like they were searching for something. One of them stopped near the creek, crouched, and put a hand flat on the ground. I say hand, but I couldn't see details. Just a shape bending, pausing, then standing again. Joanne stood up. "We're leaving." "Agreed." We got in my truck. I turned the key. Nothing. The engine didn't even try to turn over. The dash lights were dead. I tried again. Same result. Jesus, Clint. Stay calm. We walk. Walk where? Back to my place. We get in the house, lock the doors, and wait it out. That's a 1/4 mile. Then we better move. We climbed out and started down the driveway. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. Not the pasture, not the light. Joanne stayed close. We made it to the county road and turned east. The gravel crunched loud under our boots, the only sound besides our breathing. Then I heard it. A low scrape behind us, like something heavy dragging across dirt. I stopped. Joanne stopped. We both turned. The light was gone. The pasture was dark. But between us and the house, maybe 50 yards back, something moved. Low to the ground. No lights, no shape I could make out. Just movement. "Run," I said. We ran. We didn't stop running until we reached my front porch. My lungs burned. My legs felt like water. And Joanne was bent over with her hands on her knees, gasping. I fumbled for my house key and got the door open. We stumbled inside, and I locked it behind us, threw the deadbolt, and checked every window on the ground floor. All locked. I pulled the curtains closed and turned on every light in the kitchen and living room. Joanne stood in the middle of the room, staring at nothing, her face pale. "Did you see what was following us?" she asked. "No." "Did you?" "I saw movement, that's all. Low. Fast." I went to the kitchen and filled 2 glasses with water from the tap. My hands shook enough that I spilled some on the counter. I handed her a glass and drank mine in 3 long pulls. The cold helped. It gave me something physical to focus on. Joanne sat at the table and pressed her palms flat against the wood like she was trying to ground herself. "My cattle," she said. I left them. We'll check on them when the sun comes up. Right now, we stay here. What if that thing comes here? Then we deal with it. But we're not going back out there in the dark. She nodded, but I could see she wasn't convinced. Neither was I. I grabbed my landline phone from the wall mount in the kitchen. Dial tone. I called the Ellis County Sheriff's non-emergency line and got a dispatcher who sounded half asleep. This is Clint Hargrove, out on Road 180. I need to report suspicious activity on my property and my neighbors. What kind of activity, Mr. Hargrove? Unknown aircraft, hovering low over fields, no navigation lights, no sound. Is it there now? It was 10 minutes ago. And where is it now? I don't know. It disappeared. There was a pause. I could hear keys clicking on her end. We'll send a deputy out to take a look. Might be an hour. We've got limited coverage tonight. Understood. Thank you. I hung up and looked at Joanne. They're sending someone. They're not going to find anything. Probably not. But at least it's on record. We sat at the table and waited. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the wall clock in the hallway. Every few minutes I got up and checked the windows, pulling the curtain back just enough to see out. Nothing moved. The yard was empty. The barn sat dark and still. The fields beyond were black, under a sky full of stars that felt too bright, too close, like the atmosphere had thinned and they were leaning in to watch. At 3:15 a.m., headlights swept up the driveway. A white patrol SUV with Ellis County Sheriff's markings pulled up to the house. I met the deputy at the door. His name was Tom Reeves, a guy I'd known casually for years. He had his hat on and a flashlight in his hand, and he looked tired but alert. Clint, Joanne, dispatcher said you saw something. We did. Light over Joanne's west pasture. Big, circular, no sound. It dropped low and there were figures on the ground. 5 of them. Tom's expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten. Figures. Yes, not human. At least, they didn't move like humans. You get any pictures? No, my phone died when the light got close. So did Joanne's. So did my truck. Your truck? Wouldn't start. Battery, ignition, everything dead. Soon as the light left, it worked fine. Tom looked at Joanne. That match what you saw? Yes. All of it. And my cattle went insane, broke through a fence. I don't know how many got out. Tom nodded slowly. All right, let's take a drive over there. You two stay here. I'll radio if I need backup. We're coming with you, I said. Clint, it's my neighbor's property, and I'm the one who called it in. We're coming. He didn't argue. We climbed into his SUV, Joanne in the back, me in the front. Tom drove slow, headlights cutting through the dark. When we reached Joanne's place, he pulled up near the pasture gate and put the vehicle in park. He left the lights on and the engine running. We all got out. The pasture was a mess. Fence wire hung in loose coils, posts were snapped at the base, and deep hoof tracks cut through the mud near the creek. But the cattle were there, huddled in a tight group near the barn. They weren't moving. They weren't grazing. They were just standing there, heads down, like they were waiting for something. Jesus, Joanne said. They never do that. Tom swept his flashlight across the pasture. The beam was strong, military grade, and it lit up the grass in a wide cone. He walked to the spot where I'd seen the figures. I followed. Joanne stayed by the truck. When we reached the center of the pasture, Tom crouched and ran his hand over the ground. The grass was matted down in a pattern, not trampled by hooves, pressed flat, like something heavy had rested there. The dirt underneath was warm. I could feel it through my boot when I stepped on it. Feel that? I asked. Tom nodded. Ground's warm. No fire, no burn marks. Just warm. Same thing happened at my place. The soil fused. I had it tested. He looked up at me. Fused? Melted and hardened. Over 1,800 degrees, according to the lab. But no fuel residue, no carbon, just heat. Tom stood and walked a slow circle around the area. His flashlight caught something near the edge of the pressed grass. 3 small indentations, each about 2 inches deep, arranged in a perfect triangle. He knelt and measured the spacing with his hand, equal distance between each point. He took out his phone and snapped a few pictures, then stood and walked back to me. I'm going to file this. I don't know what I'm going to call it, but I'll file it. What do you think it was? Joanne asked from the gate. Tom looked at her, then at me, then back at the indentations. I think something was here. I don't know what, but something was here. We drove back to my place. Tom stayed in his vehicle for a few minutes, writing notes on a clipboard. When he finished, he rolled down his window and handed me a card with a case number written on the back. If you see anything else, call me directly. Don't go through dispatch. You think it'll come back? I asked. I don't know, but if it does, don't go near it. Call me, stay inside, and let me handle it. He left. Joanne and I went back into the house. We didn't talk much. We were both too tired, too rattled. She took the guest room, and I went upstairs to my bedroom. I lay on top of the covers with my boots still on, staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those shapes moving across the pasture, methodical and silent. I saw the light dropping, the ground turning orange, the steam rising. And I saw that thing following us on the road, low and fast, just out of sight. At 6 a.m., I gave up and went downstairs. Joanne was already in the kitchen making coffee. She poured me a cup without asking. We sat at the table and watched the sun come up through the window. The light was clean and normal, and it made everything from the night before feel distant, like a bad dream that loses its edges when you wake up. But I knew it wasn't a dream. My phone was still dead. So was Joanne's. And when I walked out to my truck, the battery was fine, but the radio wouldn't hold a station. It jumped between frequencies on its own, static and broken voices bleeding through. Over the next 3 weeks, I didn't see the light again. But things changed, small things that added up. My tractor would start fine in the morning, then stall for no reason in the afternoon. The engine would cough, die, and restart like nothing happened. The GPS unit I use for field mapping started giving me coordinates that were miles off. I'd be standing in my North 40, and the screen would say I was in Hayes or Russell or somewhere I wasn't. I recalibrated it twice. Same problem. Joanne's cattle never went back to normal. They stayed skittish, bunched together even in open pasture, and they wouldn't go near the spot where the light had been. She had a vet come out and check them. Physically, they were fine. No injuries, no illness. But their behavior was off. The vet said it was stress, maybe from the fence breaking. She didn't buy it. Neither did I. Then, in early November, I got a call from Tom Reeves. He asked if I could meet him at the sheriff's office in Hayes. I drove in that afternoon and found him in a small conference room with a map of Ellis County spread across the table. Red pins marked 5 locations. One was my field. One was Joanne's pasture. The other 3 were scattered across the county, all rural, all farms or ranches. What is this? I asked. Reports, Tom said. Same as yours. Lights, figures, animals going crazy, equipment failing. All within the last 6 weeks. All at night. All in open fields. You talked to the others? I did. 2 of them think it's military drones. One thinks it's kids with lights. The last one, he doesn't know what to think. But they all described the same thing. White light, no sound, orange glow when it drops, and small figures moving in formation. I looked at the map. The pins formed a rough line running northeast to southwest, cutting through the county like a scar. "You report this up the chain?" "I did. Sheriff told me to document it and move on. Said we don't have the resources to chase lights in the sky." "So what do we do?" Tom folded his arms. "We watch. We document. And if it happens again, we record everything we can. Photos, video, measurements, anything that holds up." I left the office with a knot in my stomach. I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. Something was using our land, our fields, our space, and nobody was taking it seriously. I drove home and pulled my old camcorder out of the closet. It's a dinosaur, runs on mini DV tapes, but it works. I charged the battery and set it on my kitchen counter. If the light came back, I'd have proof. It took 2 more weeks. I was in the barn, fixing a busted hydraulic line on the disc harrow, when my phone buzzed. A text from Joanne. 1 word: outside. I dropped the wrench and ran to the barn door. The light was back. Not over my field this time. Not over Joanne's. It was hovering between our properties, right over the fence line, bigger than before. Twice the size of a pickup truck, maybe more. The white glow was the same, but now there were smaller lights around it. 6 or 7. Blinking in sequence like they were talking to each other. I grabbed the camcorder and ran toward the light, keeping the fence line as my guide. My boots slipped in the soft dirt, and I nearly went down twice, but I kept moving. When I got within 100 yards, I raised the camcorder and hit record. The viewfinder showed the light clearly, bright and steady, with the smaller lights circling it in a slow rotation. I zoomed in. The smaller lights weren't separate objects. They were part of the main craft, embedded in its surface, pulsing in rhythm. The hum hit me. Chest, jaw, teeth. I kept filming. The light dropped to 30 feet above the ground. The grass underneath turned orange. Steam rose. And then, just like before, shapes appeared. This time, I counted 8. They moved out in pairs, spreading across the field in a grid pattern. One of them stopped directly in front of me, maybe 50 yards out. It stood there, motionless, and I swear it was looking at me. No eyes I could see, no face, just that smooth round head tilted slightly in my direction. I kept the camera rolling. My hands shook, but I kept it steady enough to hold the frame. The figure raised one arm, long and thin, and pointed at the ground. Then it crouched, placed both hands flat on the dirt, and stayed there for 10 seconds. When it stood, the ground where its hands had been glowed faint orange, like coals under ash. It turned and walked back to the light. The others did the same, converging at the center. The light pulsed once, twice, 3 times. Then it shot straight up, faster than anything I've ever seen, and disappeared into the sky. The smaller lights went with it. The field went dark. The hum stopped. I stood there with the camcorder still recording, breathing hard, my legs shaking. I hit stop and checked the tape. It was there. All of it. The light, the figures, the glow. I had it. I ran back to the house and called Tom. He answered on the second ring. "I got it on tape," I said. "Got what?" "The light, the figures. Everything. It just happened. Between my place and Joanne's." Silence then. "I'm coming over. Don't touch that tape." He arrived 20 minutes later with another deputy I didn't recognize. They sat at my kitchen table while I played the footage on the camcorder's flip screen. Tom watched without expression. The other deputy leaned in close, squinting. When it ended, Tom looked at me. "Can you make a copy of this?" "I can transfer it to my computer. Might take a few tries. This thing's old." "Do it. And don't post it anywhere. Don't show it to anyone else, not yet." "Why not?" "Because the second this gets out, you'll have every conspiracy nut and news van in the state parked on your driveway. Let me run it up the chain first. See what comes back." I agreed. I didn't want the attention either. I just wanted answers. Over the next week, I heard nothing from Tom. I called him twice. Both times he said he was waiting on someone to get back to him. He wouldn't say who. On the 8th day, he called me. We need to meet, not at the office. Somewhere neutral. We met at a truck stop off I-70, halfway between Hayes and Salina. Tom was already there, sitting in a booth near the back with a coffee he hadn't touched. I slid in across from him. "What's going on?" I asked. I showed the tape to my captain. He showed it to someone else. I don't know who. 2 days later, I got a visit from 2 men in suits, no names, no agency, just badges and questions. What kind of questions? About you. About Joanne. About the other reports. They wanted copies of everything, the tape, the photos, my notes. I gave them copies. And they told me to stop investigating. Said it was being handled at a higher level. Said if I kept pushing, it could cause problems for my career. I felt my jaw tighten. So, that's it? We just drop it? I don't have a choice, Clint. You do. But if you go public with this, you need to understand what you're walking into. People will pick it apart. They'll call you a liar. They'll say it's CGI or a hoax. And if it's real, if someone official is already involved, you'll have a different kind of problem. I'm not looking for trouble. I just want to know what's happening on my land. Tom nodded. I get that, but I'm telling you, as someone who's seen how these things go, you're better off letting it fade. Keep your head down, keep your tape. And if it comes back, call me. I'll do what I can. He left cash on the table for the coffee and walked out. I sat there for a while, staring at the scarred formica, trying to decide what to do. I didn't want to be the guy on late-night radio talking about aliens. But I also didn't want to pretend it never happened. I'd seen it, I'd filmed it, Joanne had seen it, Tom had seen the aftermath. That was real. The question was whether proving it was worth what it would cost. I decided to wait. I took the tape, locked it in a fireproof safe in my basement, and went back to work. Harvest was done. Winter wheat was in the ground. I had repairs to finish and equipment to winterize. The routine helped. It gave me something to focus on besides the image of that figure crouched in my field, hands flat on the dirt, glowing faintly in the dark. Joanne sold her cattle in early December. She didn't say why, but I knew. They never settled. She kept the land, leased it out for hay, and took a part-time job in town. We still talk, but we don't talk about what happened. It sits between us like a scar neither of us wants to touch. In January, I got a letter. No return address. Postmarked from Kansas City. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed paragraph and a phone number at the bottom. Mr. Hargrove, we are aware of the events on your property in October and November. We are part of a civilian research group that investigates similar occurrences. If you are willing to share your documentation and experiences in a confidential setting, please call the number below. This is not a government inquiry. We simply want to understand. I stared at that letter for 3 days before I made the call. A woman answered. Her voice was calm, professional, not pushy. She asked if I was comfortable talking. I said yes. She asked me to describe what I'd seen. I did, in detail, the same way I'm writing it now. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked if I still had the tape. I do. Would you be willing to send us a copy? We can arrange a secure transfer. What do you do with it? We archive it. We compare it to other reports. We look for patterns. And if we find something significant, we share it with researchers who might be able to explain it. Government? No, independent, academic, mostly, some private. We don't work with federal agencies, too much red tape. I thought about it. Let me get back to you. Of course. The number's good for the next 6 months. If you change your mind, call any time." She hung up. I never called back. I didn't send the tape. Maybe I should have. Maybe there are patterns. Maybe other people are seeing the same things and trying to make sense of it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that once I let that tape leave my hands, I'd lose control of the story. And the story, incomplete as it is mine. It's been almost 3 years now. The light hasn't come back. My equipment works fine. The GPS holds coordinates. The radio stays on station. Joanne's pasture is just pasture again. The fused dirt in my field eventually broke apart after a hard freeze and spring thaw, and I tilled it under. You'd never know it was there. But I know. I walk past that spot every time I work the North 40, and I feel it. Not fear. Not anymore. Just a low hum of unfinished business. I'm writing this because I think it's important to say it happened. Not to convince anyone, not to prove anything, just to put it on record. If you live in rural Kansas, or anywhere the sky opens up wide and the dark gets heavy, you know there are things that don't fit into easy categories. Lights that move wrong. Sounds that sit in your chest instead of your ears. Moments where the land feels like it's holding its breath. I don't claim to know what I saw. I won't call it alien. I won't call it government. I won't call it anything except what it was. A circular light with no source. Small figures that moved without sound. And ground that fused under heat I can't explain. That's the truth. That's all I've got. If you see something similar, I'd say this. Document it if you can. Keep a record. Tell someone you trust. But don't expect answers. Don't expect anyone to believe you, and don't expect it to make sense. It won't. You'll just have to carry it the way I do, and decide whether that's enough. I still have the tape. It's in the safe, labeled and dated. Sometimes I think about watching it again, just to confirm I didn't imagine the details, but I don't need to. I remember the way the light pulsed. I remember the way the figures moved in pairs. I remember the way that one shape stood and pointed at the ground, like it was marking something. I remember the warmth under my boots when I walked to the center of the field the next morning. And I remember the look on Tom's face when he saw the footage. That quiet recognition that we were both in territory we didn't have a map for. Joanne and I had coffee last week. She asked if I thought it would ever come back. I told her I didn't know. She said she thinks about it sometimes, late at night when the wind picks up and the house creaks. She said it changed the way she looks at the sky. I told her I understood. We sat there for a while, not saying much, just two people who saw something they can't unsee, trying to live normal lives in a place that doesn't feel quite as safe as it used to. That's where I am now. Still farming. Still watching the fields. Still checking the sky on clear nights when the stars feel too close. I don't know if I'll ever get answers. I don't know if anyone will. But I know I'm not the only one. Tom showed me those red pins on the map. 5 locations, 5 reports, and those were just the ones people filed. How many others saw something and stayed quiet? How many chose to let it go rather than risk sounding crazy? I'm putting this down because silence doesn't help. It doesn't protect you. It just lets the questions pile up until they're too heavy to carry. So, here it is. My account. My truth. Take it or leave it. Believe it or don't. It happened either way. If you're reading this and you've seen something similar, lights that hover without sound, figures that move like they're measuring the ground, equipment that fails and then works again. You're not alone. You're not crazy. And you don't owe anyone an explanation. Just know that it's real, whatever it is. And know that walking away from it, choosing not to chase it, is a valid choice. That's the choice I made. I have the tape, I have the memory, and I have my land. That's enough for me. The sun still comes up over the same fields. The wheat still grows. The seasons still turn, and on cold October nights, when the air gets thin and the stars press down, I stand on my porch and look north toward the spot where it happened. I don't see anything. I don't hear anything. But I remember, and that's the weight I carry. Not fear, not wonder, just the quiet certainty that something came to my field, looked at my land, and left without a word. And I'll never know why. That's my story. That's where it ends. Or maybe where it pauses. I don't know yet. But for now, this is it. I'm Clint Hargrove. I farm 480 acres outside Hays, Kansas. And in October of 2021, something visited my land that I can't explain. If that makes me unreliable, so be it. I know what I saw, and I know I'm not the only one. My name is Bo Rankin, and I've been farming the same 640 acres in Scott County, Kansas, since I bought it from my uncle in 2003. The land sits flat and open, broken only by irrigation pivots and the occasional windbreak of Russian olive trees my grandfather planted in the 50s. I grow wheat in winter and corn in summer, rotating fields to keep the soil honest. I know every corner of this property. I know where the drainage is poor and where the topsoil runs deep. I know which fields heat up fast in spring and which ones hold frost until April. I thought I knew what belonged in the sky above those fields too. I was wrong. This happened in late July of 2022, during second harvest. The corn was coming off clean, moisture levels were good, and I was running long days to beat a weather system rolling in from Colorado. I'd been in the cab of my Case IH combine since 4:30 that morning, and by the time the sun went down, I'd cleared maybe 60 acres of the southeast quarter. The plan was to keep going until midnight, offload to the grain truck, and be back out by dawn. I've done it 100 times. It's hard work, but it's straightforward. You set your header height, watch your yield monitor, and let the machine do what it was built to do. Around 9:30 p.m., I was running the east edge of the field, about half a mile from the county road. The combine was humming smooth, cab lights were bright, and the radio was playing something low and forgettable out of Garden City. The night was clear, no moon yet, just stars packed tight enough to make the sky look textured. The temperature had dropped into the low 70s, and I had the cab window cracked to let the breeze cut through. That's when I noticed the lights. 3 of them. High up, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 feet arranged in a perfect triangle. At first, I thought they were aircraft, maybe a formation flight out of one of the bases. But they weren't moving. They just hung there, steady and bright. White with a faint blue tint. No blinking, no navigation strobes, just 3 fixed points holding their position like someone had nailed them to the sky. I slowed the combine and leaned forward to get a better angle through the windshield. The lights didn't shift. I've seen plenty of planes at night. I've seen satellites, the space station, even a meteor shower once that lit up the whole horizon. This wasn't any of that. The spacing was too perfect. The stillness too absolute. I reached for my phone to take a picture, but before I could pull it from my pocket, the combine engine stuttered. It didn't die all at once. It coughed, like it had sucked in bad fuel, then dropped RPMs. The header stopped turning. The yield monitor flickered. I eased off the throttle and tried to bring it back up, but the engine wouldn't respond. It just kept sinking, slower and slower, until it quit completely. The cab went dark. The lights, the display, the radio, everything shut off in one smooth drop. I sat there in total silence, hand still on the throttle, waiting for something to kick back in. Nothing did. I've had equipment fail before. Belts snap, bearings seize, fuel lines clog. But this was different. There was no grinding, no smell of burnt oil, no warning. The combine just stopped, like someone had reached in and pulled the power. I tried the ignition. The starter clicked once, weak and hollow, and then nothing. I checked the battery disconnect. It was fine. I checked the fuses I could reach from the cab. They looked good. I tried the key again. Same dead click. Outside, the field was black. The only light came from the stars and those 3 points overhead. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket and stepped down from the cab. The air was cooler than I expected, and it smelled wrong. Not bad, just wrong. Like ozone after a lightning strike, but sharper, metallic. I've been around diesel engines my whole life, and I know what hot metal smells like. This wasn't that. It was cleaner, colder, like the air itself had been bleached. I walked around the combine, checking for obvious damage. The header was fine. The tracks were fine. No leaks, no smoke, no signs of mechanical failure. I climbed back into the cab and tried the radio just to see if anything had power. Static. Thick, heavy static that felt like it was pushing through the speaker instead of coming from a station. I turned it off and sat there, trying to work through what had just happened. The combine was less than 3 years old. It had been serviced in June. There was no reason for it to fail like this. Then I looked up at the lights again, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not pain, pressure. Like the air around me had thickened and was pushing in from all sides. My ears started to ring, a high, thin tone that made my jaw ache. I've been around loud machinery my whole life, and I know what tinnitus feels like. This was different. This felt external, like the sound was coming from outside my head and working its way in. I climbed down from the cab and walked a few steps away from the combine. The pressure got worse. The ringing climbed in pitch. I stopped and looked up at the triangle. It hadn't moved. The 3 lights were still locked in formation, but now I could see something else. A faint glow between them, like they were connected by threads of light too dim to see clearly, but bright enough to register. I blinked, and the threads were gone. Or maybe they'd never been there. My eyes were starting to water from the ringing. I pulled out my phone. No signal, not 1 bar. I've had weak signal out here before, but never 0. I tried calling my wife anyway. The call wouldn't connect. I tried texting. The message sat there with a spinning wheel, trying to send, and then failed. I shoved the phone back in my pocket and looked around. The nearest farmhouse was 2 miles west. I could see a single yellow light from a porch lamp, small and distant. Everything else was dark. That's when I heard it. A low hum, so deep I felt it more than heard it. It rolled across the field in waves, steady and rhythmic, like a massive engine idling somewhere just out of sight. I turned in a slow circle, trying to locate the source. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The ground under my boots vibrated slightly. Not a tremor, just a faint buzz that made the dirt feel alive. I've lived through Kansas tornadoes. I know what the air feels like before one drops. This wasn't that. There was no wind, no drop in pressure, no green tint to the sky. Just that hum and the ringing in my ears and the 3 lights hanging overhead like they were waiting for something. I decided to walk back to the truck. I keep a Ford F-250 parked at the edge of the field during harvest, loaded with fuel cans, tools, and a battery jumper. It was about a 1/4 mile south, near the access road. I started walking, keeping my flashlight aimed at the ground. The beam looked weak, thinner than it should have been, like the batteries were dying even though I'd replaced them 2 days ago. The hum followed me, or maybe I was walking through it. Either way, it didn't fade. If anything, it got stronger. My chest started to ache. a dull pressure right behind my sternum that made it hard to take a full breath. I stopped and leaned on a pivot support pole, trying to steady myself. The metal was warm. Not hot, just warm, like it had been sitting in the sun all day even though the night was cool. I jerked my hand back and kept walking. Halfway to the truck, I looked back at the combine. It was dark, just a black silhouette against the stars. And above it, the triangle had shifted. Not much, maybe a few degrees, but it had moved. The 3 lights were now angled slightly to the west like they were tracking something, or watching something. I picked up my pace. My boots crunched through dry corn stalks and the sound felt too loud in the stillness. No crickets, no distant highway noise, just my footsteps and the hum and the ringing in my ears. When I reached the truck, I grabbed the door handle and yanked it open. The dome light didn't come on. I climbed in and turned the key. The engine didn't even try to start. No click, no turnover, nothing, dead. I sat there with my hands on the wheel, staring through the windshield at nothing. 2 machines. Both dead. Both with fresh batteries and full tanks. And 3 lights in the sky that shouldn't be there, holding formation like they were bolted to the dark. That's when I saw the headlights. They were coming up the access road from the south, moving slow and steady. I recognized the vehicle before it got close. A white Silverado with a light bar on the roof. Sarah Winstead, the deputy who patrols this area at night. She'd pulled me over once for a busted taillight and let me off with a warning. I didn't know her well, but I knew she was solid, calm. The kind of person who doesn't panic. She pulled up next to my truck and rolled down her window. "You broken down, Bo?" "Yeah. Combine died on me about 20 minutes ago. Truck won't start either." She frowned. "Both?" "Both." She killed her engine and stepped out, leaving the headlights on. They cut across the field in 2 bright cones, lighting up the corn stubble and the shadow of the combine in the distance. She walked over to my truck and leaned on the door frame. "You checked the batteries?" "I did. Everything looks fine. It just won't turn over." "Let me take a look." She popped the hood on my truck and pulled out a small flashlight. I stood next to her while she checked connections, tapped the terminals, and tested the ground. Everything was tight. She straightened up and looked at me. "Battery's good. Connections are clean. I don't see anything wrong." Same with the combine. It just stopped. No warning, no noise, nothing. She glanced past me toward the field, and I saw her expression change. Not fear, just focus, sharp and sudden. "What are those?" she asked, pointing up. I turned and looked. The 3 lights were still there, locked in their triangle, hovering above the southeast corner of the field. They seemed brighter now, or maybe my eyes had adjusted. The glow between them was back, faint but visible, like someone had drawn lines in the air with a pencil. "I don't know," I said. "They showed up right before the combine died." Sarah walked a few steps away from the truck, tilting her head back to get a better view. I followed. We stood there in the wash of her headlights, staring up at those 3 points, and the hum in my chest started again. I saw her wince and press a hand to her ribs. "You feel that?" she asked. "Yeah. Started about 10 minutes ago." "What is it?" "I don't know, but it's coming from up there." She lowered her gaze and looked at me. "You call anyone?" "Tried, no signal." She pulled out her radio and keyed the mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. You copy?" Static, thick and heavy, just like my combine radio. She tried again. "Dispatch, Unit 7, do you copy?" More static. She clipped the radio back to her belt and walked back to her Silverado. She turned the key. The engine fired up clean, smooth idle, no hesitation. She looked at me through the windshield and I saw the confusion on her face. Her truck was fine. Mine was dead. The combine was dead. but hers was running like nothing was wrong. She shut it off and stepped out. "This doesn't make sense." "No, it doesn't. You want me to try jumping your truck?" "Yeah. Let's try it." She pulled a set of jumper cables from her toolbox and backed her truck up to mine, nose to nose. We hooked the cables up, red to red, black to ground, and I climbed into my truck. She gave me a thumbs up. I turned the key. Nothing, not even a click. Sarah leaned under my hood and checked the connections again. "Cables are good. Your battery's taking the charge. I can see it on my gauge." "Then why won't it start?" "I don't know." She unhooked the cables and stood there with her hands on her hips, looking at my truck like it had personally offended her. Then she looked up at the lights again. They were closer. Not by much, maybe a few 100 feet, but they definitely moved. The triangle was tighter now, the points closer together, and the glow between them was solid enough that I could trace the edges. "Bo," Sarah said quietly, "those things are coming down." She was right. The lights were descending, slow and controlled, no wobble or drift. They dropped in perfect unison, maintaining their formation. As they got lower, the hum got louder. I could feel it in my teeth now, in the bones of my skull. Sarah backed up toward her truck, and I followed. She reached for her door handle, and that's when her headlights flickered. Both beams dimmed, then flared bright, then dimmed again. They pulsed in rhythm with the hum, like they were breathing. Sarah froze, hand on the door. "What the hell?" The lights dropped again. Now they were maybe 500 feet up. Close enough that I could see they weren't just points. They were craft. Solid objects, each one triangular, each one dark except for the single bright light at its center. They moved with a precision I've never seen in anything man-made. No engine noise, no exhaust. Just smooth, silent descent. Sarah pulled her door open and reached for the radio. "I'm calling this in. You won't get through. I have to try." She grabbed the mic and keyed it. "Dispatch, Unit 7, this is an emergency. I need immediate backup at..." The radio exploded with static so loud I heard it from 10 feet away. Sarah jerked the mic away from her face and dropped it. The static didn't stop. It kept pouring out of the speaker, harsh and layered, like 1,000 voices talking at once but too distorted to make out words. She reached for the volume knob and turned it all the way down. The static kept going. Then her headlights went out. Not dimmed, not flickered. They just shut off, both at the same time, leaving us in total darkness except for the 3 lights overhead. Sarah fumbled for her flashlight, clicked it on, and aimed it at the field. The beam shot out straight and strong for maybe 10 feet, then stopped. Not faded, stopped, like it hit an invisible wall and couldn't go any farther. She turned to me, and I saw the fear in her eyes. Not panic, not yet, but it was there, sitting just under the surface. "Bo, we need to leave. Now. On foot? If we have to." The 3 craft dropped lower. Now they were maybe 200 feet up, close enough that I could see details. Smooth surfaces, no rivets, no seams, no markings. Just dark, matte material that seemed to absorb light instead of reflect it. The glow between them was bright now, almost solid, forming a perfect triangle of pale blue light that connected the 3 points like they were nodes in a circuit. The hum shifted. It climbed in pitch, and the pressure in my chest spiked so hard I gasped. Sarah doubled over, one hand on her truck for support. I grabbed her shoulder to steady her, and I felt heat radiating from her skin through her uniform shirt. She was burning up. "Are you okay?" I asked. "No, something's wrong. I can't..." She didn't finish. The craft dropped again, and this time they stopped at treetop level, maybe 80 feet above the field. The triangle of light between them flared bright, and the ground underneath lit up like someone had turned on a floodlight. But the light was wrong. It didn't spread. It stayed contained in a perfect circle directly beneath the craft, and everything outside that circle stayed dark. Sarah straightened up, still breathing hard. "We're leaving, come on." She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the access road. We started walking, fast at first, then jogging. My lungs burned. The pressure in my chest made it hard to pull air. Behind us, the hum got louder, deeper, and I felt the ground vibrate under my boots. Then the light moved. The circle of light shifted across the field, sliding over the corn stubble like a searchlight, smooth and deliberate. It didn't sweep, it moved in straight lines, pausing at intervals, then shifting direction. Sarah and I stopped running and stood there on the access road, breathing hard, watching that light work its way across the ground. It wasn't searching randomly, it was systematic, methodical, like it was mapping the field. "Keep moving," Sarah said, her voice tight. We started walking again, faster now, heading south toward the county road. The access road was rough, rutted from spring rains and heavy equipment, and I had to watch my footing. Sarah kept her flashlight aimed ahead, but the beam was still cut short, stopping after 10 feet like it was hitting a curtain. The hum followed us. It didn't fade with distance. It stayed constant, a low throb that made my ribcage feel like it was vibrating. I looked back once. The 3 craft were still there, holding position above the field, the light between them pulsing in slow rhythm. The circle of light on the ground had stopped moving. It sat there, bright and steady, illuminating nothing but dirt and cut stalks. "Don't look at it," Sarah said. "Why?" "Just don't." I didn't argue. I kept my eyes on the road and kept walking. We covered maybe a quarter mile before Sarah stopped and pulled out her radio again. She keyed the mic. "Dispatch, Unit 7. Emergency. Do you copy?" Static. She tried her cell phone. No signal. She cursed under her breath and shoved it back in her pocket. "We need to get to the county road. Maybe I can flag someone down. It's after 10. There won't be much traffic." Then we walked to the nearest house. "That's 3 miles. You have a better idea?" I didn't. We kept walking. The night was quiet except for the hum and our footsteps. No wind, no crickets, no distant engine noise. Just us and the open dark and those 3 lights behind us that wouldn't go away. My chest ached. My ears were ringing so loud I could barely hear Sarah when she spoke. "Bo, I need to tell you something." "What?" "This isn't the first time." I stopped. "What do you mean?" She turned to face me, and in the weak glow of her flashlight I could see the strain on her face. 2 weeks ago, I got a call about lights over a field north of Modoc. Farmer said his equipment died, same as yours. By the time I got there, the lights were gone. No evidence. No damage. Just a dead tractor and a guy who couldn't explain what happened. Why didn't you report it? I did. Sheriff told me to log it and move on, said it was probably kids with drones. That wasn't drones. I know, but that's what went in the report. Did the tractor start again? Eventually, about 20 minutes after the lights left. Fired right up like nothing happened. I looked back at the field. The 3 craft were still there, but they'd risen slightly, maybe another 100 feet. The circle of light on the ground had dimmed. You think mine will start when they leave? I don't know. Maybe. What about yours? I don't know that either. We reached the county road and turned west. The pavement was cracked and old with grass growing through the seams. Sarah walked in the middle of the road, sweeping her flashlight back and forth looking for headlights. Nothing came. The road stretched out empty in both directions, a black ribbon cutting through flat land that went on forever. The hum started to fade, slowly at first, then faster. like someone was turning down a volume knob. The pressure in my chest eased. I stopped and turned around. The three craft were rising, not fast, but steady, climbing back toward the altitude where I'd first seen them. The triangle of light between them dimmed, flickered, and went out. The circle on the ground vanished, and just like that, the field went dark. Sarah stopped next to me. We stood there in the middle of the county road, watching those 3 points of light climb higher and higher until they were just stars again, indistinguishable from the rest of the sky. Then they blinked out. 1, 2, 3, gone. The silence that followed felt heavy, not peaceful, just empty. Like the air had been drained of something I didn't have a name for. My ears were still ringing, but the hum was gone. The pressure was gone. I took a deep breath, and it came easy. "Is it over?" I asked. "I think so." We walked back to the field. It took us 15 minutes, and with every step, I kept expecting to see those lights come back. They didn't. When we reached Sarah's truck, she tried the ignition. The engine fired on the first try. Clean and smooth, no hesitation. She looked at me through the windshield, and I saw the relief on her face. I walked to my truck and tried the key. It started. No click, no delay, just a clean ignition like it had never failed. I let it idle and walked around to check the hood. Everything looked normal, no burn marks, no melted wires, no sign of damage. I climbed back in and turned on the headlights. They worked, bright and steady. I checked my phone. Full signal, 4 bars. Sarah got out of her truck and walked over. "Your combine? Let's find out." We drove across the field, my truck following hers, headlights bouncing over the uneven ground. When we reached the combine, I climbed up into the cab and tried the ignition. The engine turned over, coughed once, and roared to life. The cab lights came on. The display lit up. The radio crackled with static for a second, then locked onto a station. Everything was working. I shut it down and climbed out. Sarah was standing next to her truck, arms crossed, staring at the spot where the circle of light had been. I walked over and stood next to her. "You see anything?" I asked. "No." "You?" "No." But that wasn't entirely true. The ground where the light had been was darker. Not scorched, not burned, just darker, like the color had been pulled out of it. I crouched and ran my hand over the dirt. It felt smooth, too smooth, like it had been polished. I dug my fingers in and pulled up a handful. The texture was normal an inch down, but the surface was different. Finer, almost glassy. Sarah knelt next to me and touched the ground. "What is this?" "I don't know, but it wasn't like this before." "You sure?" "I've been farming this field for 20 years. I know what the dirt feels like." She stood and pulled out her phone. "I'm taking pictures." She took a dozen shots from different angles, close-ups of the ground, wide shots of the field, and a few of the combine. Then she put her phone away and looked at me. "I need to call this in." "And say what?" "The truth. Lights, equipment failure, unknown craft, all of it." "You think they'll believe you?" "I don't care. It happened. I saw it. You saw it. That's enough." She walked back to her truck and grabbed the radio. This time, it worked. The static was gone, and dispatch came through clear. She reported the incident in short, clipped sentences. Location, time, description. She didn't editorialize. She just laid it out. When she finished, dispatch asked if she needed backup. She said no. They told her to file a full report in the morning and signed off. Sarah hung the mic back on the dash and looked at me. "You okay?" "No." "Me neither." We stood there for a while, not saying much. Eventually, I asked her if she wanted to stay while I finished the field. She said no. She needed to get back on patrol. but she gave me her cell number and told me to call if anything else happened. I said I would. She drove off, taillights disappearing down the access road, and I was alone again. I stood next to the combine looking up at the sky. It was clear, stars everywhere, no triangle, no lights. Just the normal Kansas night I'd known my whole life. But it didn't feel normal. It felt like something had changed, like a line had been crossed that I didn't even know was there. I climbed back into the combine, fired it up, and went back to work. The machine ran fine, the header cut clean. The grain flowed into the tank like it was supposed to. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I worked until 1:30 a.m., then called it. I dumped the grain into the truck, parked the combine at the edge of the field, and drove home. My wife Linda was asleep when I came in. I didn't wake her. I didn't know what I'd say. I showered, fell into bed, and lay there staring at the ceiling until the sun came up. The next morning, I called my uncle. He's 83, still sharp, and he's farmed this land longer than anyone. I told him what happened. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "You're not the first," he said finally. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this has been going on for a long time, longer than you know. You've seen them?" "Once. Summer of 1971. I was running wheat near the Kansas-Colorado line. Lights came down, same as you described. 3 of them in a triangle. My tractor died. I walked 5 miles to the nearest house and called the sheriff. By the time we got back, the lights were gone and the tractor was running. Sheriff told me not to talk about it." "Did you?" "No, not for a long time, but others did. Farmers mostly. Every few years someone sees something. Equipment fails. Animals panic. And then it's over, and everyone goes back to pretending it didn't happen. Why? Because there's no good answer. And people don't like questions they can't answer. So they bury it." I didn't know what to say to that. My uncle told me to be careful, keep my head down, and not to go looking for trouble. I told him I wasn't looking for anything. It found me. I went back to the field that afternoon to finish the harvest. The ground where the light had been was still dark, still smooth. I took my own pictures, then kept working. The combine ran fine, no problems. But every time I looked up at the sky, I felt that pressure in my chest again. Faint, like a memory, but there. Sarah filed her report. I know because she called me 2 days later and said the sheriff had read it and told her to keep it quiet. No press, no outside investigators, just a note in the file and a warning to stay professional. She was pissed, but she didn't push it. She couldn't afford to lose her job. I kept farming. The rest of the harvest went smooth. No more lights, no more failures. But I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before. The way the sky looks just before dark. The way the air feels when the wind dies. The way the ground hums under my boots when I stand still for too long. And I started noticing the stories. Not in the news, not on TV, but in conversations at the co-op, at the diner in town, at the feed store. Farmers talking in low voices about lights they'd seen, equipment that had died for no reason, animals that had panicked and broken through fences. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, but everybody knew. Something was out there. Something that came and went on its own schedule, for its own reasons. And we were just trying to live around it. 3 weeks after the incident, I was back in that same field, running a disc harrow to turn the stubble under. It was mid-afternoon, clear and bright, and I was thinking about nothing in particular. Then I felt it again. That pressure in my chest, that hum in my bones. I looked up. Nothing. Just blue sky and a few scattered clouds. But the feeling was there. Faint, but present. Like something was close, just out of sight, watching. I shut down the tractor and climbed out. I stood in the middle of the field, turning in a slow circle, scanning the horizon. Nothing moved. No lights, no craft, no sound except the wind and the distant hum of the highway. But I knew. I knew something was there. I got back in the tractor and kept working. But I didn't look up again. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to know. That feeling didn't go away. Not completely. It would fade for days, sometimes weeks, and I'd convince myself it was over. Then I'd be out in the field, or driving home at night, or standing on my porch in the dark, and it would come back. That pressure, that sense of being watched. I never saw the lights again, but I didn't need to. I knew they were there. Linda noticed the change in me. She didn't say anything at first, but I could see it in the way she looked at me when I came in late from the fields, the way she'd ask if everything was okay, and I'd say yes, even though we both knew it wasn't. Finally, one night in early September, she sat me down at the kitchen table and told me to talk. I told her everything. The lights, the equipment failures, the craft, Sarah Winstead, the smooth ground. All of it. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "I believe you," she said. "You do? Of course I do. You're not the kind of man who makes things up." "Then what do I do?" "You keep living, you keep farming, and you don't let it take over your life." She was right, but it wasn't that simple. The not knowing ate at me. I started researching, not conspiracy theories or alien abduction stories. I looked for documented cases, official reports, FAA records, military flight logs, anything that might explain what I'd seen. I found more than I expected. Not a lot, but enough. Reports from farmers across the Midwest describing similar incidents. Lights in formation, equipment failures, strange marks on the ground. Most of them were buried in local newspaper archives or old sheriff's reports that had been digitized but never publicized. Nobody was talking about it openly, but the pattern was there if you looked. I found a case from 1987 in Finney County. A farmer named Dale Morris reported 3 lights in a triangle hovering over his wheat field. His tractor died. His radio went to static. By the time the sheriff arrived, the lights were gone and everything was working again. The report was filed as Unexplained Aerial Phenomenon and never followed up on. I found another case from 2004 in Greeley County. Same description. Triangle formation, equipment failure, no explanation. The farmer, a woman named Ruth Holloway, told the investigating officer she'd felt pressure in her chest and heard a low hum. Her cattle had broken through a fence and wouldn't go back to the pasture for 2 weeks. The report noted possible military aircraft, but provided no confirmation. I kept digging. The cases went back decades. Not every year, but often enough to establish a pattern. Summer and fall, mostly, rural areas, always at night, always the same description. And always the same result. No answers, no follow-up, no explanation. I printed out a dozen reports and spread them across my kitchen table. Linda looked at them and shook her head. "What are you trying to prove?" she asked. "That I'm not crazy? That this is real?" "You don't need to prove for me, Bo. I already told you I believe you. But what if it happens again? What if it happens to someone else? Then they'll deal with it the same way you did. You can't solve this. You can't chase it down and make it make sense. It doesn't work that way." I knew she was right, but I couldn't let it go. Not yet. I reached out to Dale Morris. He'd moved to Colorado, but I found a phone number through a property record search. I called him one evening and introduced myself. I told him what had happened to me and said I'd read his report from 1987. There was a long pause. Then he said, "I don't talk about that anymore. I understand, but I'm trying to figure out what I saw, and your case matches mine. Doesn't matter. Nobody believed me then. Nobody believes me now. And I'm too old to care. Did it ever come back? Another pause. Longer this time. Yeah, 3 more times over the next 10 years. Always in the summer, always the same lights. Then it stopped. I don't know why, it just stopped. Did anything change? In your life, I mean. I sold the farm, moved to the city, couldn't take it anymore. Every time I'd go out at night, I'd be looking at the sky waiting for them to come back. It was eating me up, so I left. Do you regret it? No, but I think about it, still do. Every time I see a clear night, I wonder if they're still out there. Do you think they are? Yeah, I do. He hung up after that. I tried calling him back a few days later, but the number was disconnected. I looked for Ruth Holloway next. I found an obituary from 2019. She'd died of a heart attack at 63. There was no mention of the lights, of course, just a normal life summarized in a few paragraphs. But I wondered if she'd carried it with her the way I was carrying it. If she'd looked at the sky the same way Dale did, the same way I do now. In late October, I got a call from Sarah Winstead. She'd been reassigned to a different patrol route farther south, away from the fields where we'd seen the lights. She didn't think it was a coincidence. "They're moving me out of the area," she said. "Sheriff says it's just a rotation, but I know better." Because of the report? Because I won't shut up about it. I've been asking questions, digging through old files. He doesn't like it. What did you find? More than I expected. There are reports going back to the 60s. Lights, equipment failures, all of it. But they're buried, filed under weather phenomena or electrical interference. Nothing gets flagged as unexplained. Why? Because nobody wants to deal with it. It's easier to bury it and move on. So what do we do? I don't know, but I'm not giving up. I'll keep looking. If I find anything solid, I'll let you know. She never called back. I tried reaching her a few weeks later, but her number was out of service. I checked with the sheriff's office. They said she'd resigned. No forwarding information. I don't know if she left because of the lights or because she was tired of fighting a system that didn't want answers. Either way, she was gone. The winter was quiet. I kept farming, kept working the land, kept checking the sky. The pressure in my chest came and went, but it was faint, manageable. Linda and I didn't talk about the lights much. We just lived, planted winter wheat, fixed equipment, made plans for spring. Then, in early March, I got an email. No name, no subject line, just a message from an address I didn't recognize. It said, "You're not alone. Others have seen it. If you want to know more, reply to this message." I stared at that email for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it and move on. Part of me wanted to know. I replied with one word. How? The response came 3 hours later. There's a group, farmers mostly, people who've seen the lights. We share information. No publicity, no media, just documentation. If you're interested, we can talk. I agreed. A week later, I received a phone call from a man who identified himself only as Robert. He said he'd been documenting triangle sightings across Kansas, Nebraska, and Colorado for 15 years. He had over 60 cases. Most of them matched what I'd seen. Triangle formation, equipment failure, smooth ground, no explanation. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Because nobody else will, and because I think it's important." Important how? That's what I'm trying to figure out. These aren't random. There's a pattern. Timing, location, even the type of equipment that fails. It's deliberate. Deliberate how? I don't know yet. But I think they're studying us. Or the land. Or both. Who's they? I don't know that either. But I know it's been happening for a long time, and I know it's not stopping. Robert sent me a file with detailed reports from other farmers. Names were redacted, but the descriptions were clear. Triangle lights, equipment death, ground changes, and in almost every case the same feeling. Pressure in the chest, ringing in the ears, the sense of being watched. One report stood out. A farmer in Wichita County had seen the lights 4 times over a span of 10 years. Each time they'd appeared over the same field. He'd taken soil samples after each incident and had them tested. The results showed elevated levels of silicon and trace amounts of an unidentified metallic compound. The lab couldn't explain it. I took my own soil sample from the spot where the light had been. I sent it to a private lab in Kansas City. It took 2 weeks to get the results. Elevated silicon, trace metals. Same as the Wichita County case. No explanation. I shared the results with Robert. He added them to his file. He told me he'd been trying to get academic researchers interested, but nobody would touch it. Too controversial, too fringe, too risky for their careers. So he kept documenting on his own, building a database that nobody would ever see except the handful of people who cared. "Do you think we'll ever get answers?" I asked him. "Honestly, no. I think this is bigger than us, and I think whoever's behind it doesn't want to be found. Then why keep doing this? Because someone should know, even if it's just us. That's where I am now. Still farming, still working the land, still checking the sky. The lights haven't come back. Not yet. But I know they will. I can feel it. That pressure in my chest, faint but constant. Like a frequency I can't tune out. Linda and I are doing okay. We don't talk about the lights unless I bring them up, which isn't often. She's been patient with me, more patient than I deserve. But I see the worry in her eyes when I stay out too late, or when I stand on the porch staring at the sky. I'm part of Robert's group now. We share reports, compare notes, document what we can. There are about 20 of us, spread across 5 states. Most of us have seen the lights multiple times. A few have only seen them once. But we all carry it the same way. That weight of knowing something happened that nobody else believes. I don't expect anyone to believe me. I wouldn't have believed it myself a year ago. But I know what I saw. I know what happened to my equipment. I know what that ground looked like after the lights left. And I know I'm not the only one. If you're reading this because you've seen something similar, I want you to know you're not crazy. You're not alone. And you don't owe anyone an explanation. Just document what you can. Take pictures, take samples, write it down. And if you need someone to talk to, find people like Robert. Find people like me. We're out here, we've seen it, and we believe you. The research became a second job I never asked for. Every spare hour I had, I was reading reports, cross-referencing dates, mapping locations. Robert sent me access to his database, and I spent weeks going through it. The patterns were undeniable once you knew what to look for. The sightings clustered around agricultural areas. They peaked in late summer and early fall, during harvest season. And they always involved the same type of equipment failure. Engines that quit without warning and restarted without explanation. But there were details that didn't fit. In some cases, the ground showed no changes. In others, the soil was altered so dramatically that crops wouldn't grow there for years. Some witnesses reported time loss, arriving home hours later than they should have with no memory of the gap. Others, like me, had perfect recall of every second. I started keeping a journal. Not just about the lights, but about everything. The weather, the crop yields, the behavior of animals in the area, anything that might correlate. I noted when the pressure in my chest returned, even when I couldn't see anything in the sky. I tracked it for 3 months and found a pattern. Every 2 weeks, give or take a day, I'd feel it. Always at night. Always when I was alone in the fields. Linda found the journal one evening while I was in the barn. She didn't say anything at first, but at dinner that night she set it on the table between us. "Bo, this is getting out of hand. I'm just documenting. You're obsessing. You're out there every night, watching the sky, writing in this thing like it's going to give you answers. It's not healthy. Something happened to me. I need to understand it. No, you need to accept that you might never understand it, and you need to decide if you're going to let it run your life." We didn't talk much after that. I knew she was right, but I couldn't stop. The not knowing was worse than the fear. At least when I was researching, documenting, mapping, I felt like I was doing something, like I had some measure of control. In April, Robert called with news. He'd been contacted by a researcher from Colorado State University, a physicist named Dr. Alan Brenner, who studied atmospheric phenomena. Brenner had read about similar cases and wanted to interview witnesses. He wasn't promising answers, but he was willing to listen. Robert asked if I'd be willing to talk to him. I agreed. 2 weeks later, Dr. Brenner drove out to the farm. He was in his 50s, thin and tall, with wire-rimmed glasses and the careful, measured speech of someone who'd spent his life in academia. We sat at my kitchen table, and I told him everything. He took notes, asked clarifying questions, and didn't interrupt. When I finished, he sat back and tapped his pen against his notepad. "Mr. Rankin, I want to be clear about something. I can't tell you what you saw. I don't have that answer, but I can tell you what it wasn't." "All right." "It wasn't ball lightning. It wasn't St. Elmo's fire. It wasn't atmospheric reflection or temperature inversion. Those phenomena don't behave the way you described. They don't hold formation. They don't cause localized electromagnetic interference. And they don't leave physical changes in soil composition." "So what does that leave?" "I don't know. That's the honest answer. But I will say this. You're not the first person to describe these exact characteristics. I've interviewed 11 other witnesses across Colorado, Kansas, and Nebraska. Every single one described triangle formations, equipment failure, and soil changes. The consistency is remarkable. Have you published any of this?" He smiled, but it was a tired smile. I tried, got laughed out of 2 conferences and told by my department chair to focus on serious research. The academic community isn't interested in unexplained phenomena. Too much risk, too little reward. Then why are you still doing it? Because good science doesn't ignore data just because it's inconvenient. And because I think there's something real here, even if I don't understand it yet. Dr. Brenner asked if he could take samples from the spot where the light had been. I showed him the location, and he spent an hour collecting soil from different depths, taking measurements, and photographing the area. Before he left, he told me he'd run the samples through his lab and send me the results. I never expected to hear from him again, but 6 weeks later, I got an email. The subject line read, "Findings. The soil samples showed elevated levels of silicon dioxide, consistent with exposure to intense heat. But the heat distribution was unusual. Instead of radiating outward from a central point, like you'd expect from a fire or explosion, the heat had been applied evenly across the entire surface." Dr. Brenner wrote that he'd never seen anything like it. He theorized that the heat source had been above the ground, projecting downward in a uniform field. He also found trace amounts of an isotope he couldn't identify. Not radioactive, not dangerous, just present in quantities that didn't match natural soil composition. He'd sent samples to 2 other labs for confirmation, and both came back with the same result. Unknown isotope. No match in any database. This suggests, he wrote, that whatever caused the soil changes introduced material that doesn't occur naturally in this region. I can't speculate on the source, but the evidence is clear. Something physical happened here. I printed the email and added it to the folder I kept with all my documentation. The folder was thick now, over 200 pages. Reports, photos, soil analysis, maps, timelines. It was more than enough to prove something had happened. But proving it to myself wasn't the same as proving it to the world. In June, I attended my first meeting of Robert's group. It was held in a small community center in Colby, Kansas, about 90 miles from my farm. There were 18 people there, all farmers or ranchers, all witnesses to similar events. We sat in a circle and shared our stories. Some of them were identical to mine. Others had details I hadn't experienced. One man, a cattle rancher from Nebraska, described seeing figures on the ground near his barn. Small, maybe 4 feet tall, moving in pairs. They didn't approach him, didn't interact with anything. They just moved across his property for about 10 minutes, then vanished when the lights above them rose and disappeared. Another woman, a wheat farmer from eastern Colorado, described her truck being lifted 6 inches off the ground while the lights were overhead. She'd felt weightless, like she was floating, even though she was sitting in the cab with her seatbelt on. When the lights left, the truck dropped back down with a thud that cracked her windshield. Listening to these stories, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Not because I wanted this to be happening to other people, but because it confirmed I wasn't losing my mind. These were rational, grounded people who'd built their lives around predictable, physical work. And something had happened to all of us that defied every rule we understood. We talked about going public, making a website, contacting journalists, forcing the issue into the open. But most of the group voted against it. Too much risk of ridicule, too much chance of becoming a spectacle. We agreed to keep documenting, keep sharing information among ourselves, and wait for the right opportunity. I drove home that night feeling lighter than I had in months. Linda noticed the change immediately. "You seem better," she said. "I met other people who've seen it. I'm not alone." She hugged me, and I felt the tension I'd been carrying in my shoulders start to ease. Maybe I wouldn't get answers. Maybe I'd never know what those lights were or why they came to my field. But knowing I wasn't the only one made it bearable. The summer passed quietly. I finished the harvest, planted winter wheat, and tried to get back to normal. The pressure in my chest came and went, but it was fainter now, easier to ignore. I stopped checking the sky every night. I stopped writing in the journal. I tried to let it go. Then, in early November, I got a call from a reporter. She'd gotten my name from someone in Robert's group, she wouldn't say who, and wanted to interview me for a story about unexplained aerial phenomena in the Midwest. I told her no. She pushed. Said she'd been investigating these cases for 2 years and had credible witnesses, documented evidence, everything. She promised to handle it respectfully, no sensationalism. I still said no, but I gave her Dr. Brenner's contact information. If anyone could speak to this with authority, it was him. The story ran 3 weeks later in a regional magazine. It was careful, measured, and focused on the data rather than the speculation. Dr. Brenner was quoted extensively. My name wasn't mentioned, but several other farmers from Robert's group agreed to be interviewed. The response was mixed. Some people took it seriously, others dismissed it as nonsense. But it was out there. That was something. I'll end this the way I started. My name is Bo Rankin. I farm 640 acres in Scott County, Kansas. In July of 2022, 3 lights appeared over my field in a perfect triangle. My equipment died. The ground changed. And something I can't explain came down from the sky and left without a word. It happened, I saw it, and I'm still here trying to make sense of it. But I'm not doing it alone anymore. There are others like me. People who've seen the lights, who've felt the pressure, who've watched their equipment die and restart without explanation. We're out here, living normal lives, farming the same land we've always farmed. And we carry this knowledge quietly, sharing it only with those who will understand. That's my story. That's all I've got. If the lights come back, I'll document it. If they don't, I'll keep farming and keep watching the sky. Either way, I'll carry this with me for the rest of my life. And maybe that's enough. Maybe knowing is enough, even if nobody else does. The land doesn't care what we've seen. It keeps producing. The crops keep growing. The seasons keep turning. And somewhere above it all, in the clear night sky over Kansas, something is watching. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it's there, but I know it's real. And I know I'm not the only one who's seen it. That has to be enough. My name is Tommy Delroy, and I run a dairy operation outside of Hugoton, Kansas. It's not a big place. 60 head of Holstein, 100 acres of feed corn, and a barn that's older than I am. My grandfather built it in 1954, and it's held up better than most things from that era. I've got modern equipment inside, climate control, automatic feeders, and a security camera system I installed 3 years ago after someone tried to steal a tractor from the equipment shed. The cameras run 24/7, motion activated, with cloud backup. I check them maybe once a week, usually just to make sure everything's recording properly. I never expected them to show me something I couldn't explain. This happened in September of 2023, early in the month before the weather turned. I remember because I just finished the second cutting of alfalfa and was getting ready to rotate the herd to fresh pasture. It was a Tuesday night, clear and cool, the kind of night where you can see every star, and the Milky Way looks like a smudge of smoke across the sky. I'd gone to bed around 10:30, which is early for me, but I'd been up since 4 o'clock that morning dealing with a sick calf. Around 2:15 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was an alert from the camera system, motion detected in the main barn. That's not unusual. Cows move around at night. Sometimes they get restless or one of them goes into labor. I pulled up the app and checked the live feed. Everything looked normal. The cows were standing in their stalls, a few lying down, nothing out of the ordinary. I figured the system had triggered on one of them shifting positions. I set the phone down and went back to sleep. The next morning, I was in the barn by 5:30 for the first milking. Everything seemed fine. The cows were calm, eating their feed, behaving normally. But Elliot Granger, my hired hand who's worked with me for 8 years, was standing by the east wall looking up at the rafters with a strange expression on his face. "Something wrong?" I asked. He pointed up. "You see that?" I looked. One of the overhead lights was out. Not blown, just off. The bulb looked intact, and the fixture wasn't damaged. I grabbed a ladder, climbed up, and checked it. The bulb was loose in the socket. I tightened it, and it came right back on. "Must have vibrated loose," I said. "Maybe." Elliot didn't sound convinced. "What's bothering you?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Something feels off. The cows are too quiet." I looked around. He was right. The barn was quieter than usual. Normally, there's a constant low hum of movement, chewing, shifting. This morning, the cows were still. Not scared, not stressed, just still. Like they were waiting for something. "They're fine," I said. "Probably just tired." "Yeah, probably." But it stuck with me. I know my herd. I know their rhythms, their sounds, their behavior. And something about the way they were acting didn't sit right. I finished the morning milking, turned the herd out to pasture, and went inside for breakfast. My wife, Karen, was already up, making coffee. "You sleep okay?" she asked. "Got woken up by a motion alert around 2. Nothing serious." "The barn?" "Yeah, just a cow moving around." She nodded and poured me a cup. I sat at the table and pulled out my phone to check the footage from last night. I do this sometimes, just to review what triggered the alert. Most of the time it's nothing. A cat, a shadow, a cow, scratching against a post. But I like to stay on top of it. I opened the app, selected the main barn camera, and scrolled to 2:15 a.m. The timestamp showed 2:14:52. The video was clear. The barn was lit by the overhead fixtures, and I could see all 60 cows in their stalls. They were standing, most of them, a few lying down. Normal nighttime behavior. Then, at exactly 2:15 a.m, they all stopped moving. Not gradually. All at once. Every cow in the barn froze in place like someone had hit a pause button. The ones that were chewing stopped mid-chew. The ones that were shifting weight stopped mid-shift. Even their ears, which are always twitching to catch sounds, went still. It was the most unnatural thing I'd ever seen. I leaned closer to the screen. The timestamp kept running. 2:15:01, 2:15:02, 2:15:03. The cows didn't move. Not an inch. For 9 full seconds, 60 animals stood completely motionless. Then, at 2:15:09, they all started moving again, at the same instant, like nothing had happened. I rewound the video and watched it again. Same thing. 9 seconds of perfect stillness, then movement. I checked the other cameras. One pointed at the equipment shed, one at the south pasture, one at the driveway. All of them showed the same timestamp. No glitches, no stuttering, no indication that the system had malfunctioned. "Karen, come look at this." She walked over and leaned against my shoulder. I played the clip for her. She watched in silence, then straightened up. "That's strange." "Very. You think it's the camera?" "I don't know. But all the cows stopped at the exact same time. That doesn't make sense." "Maybe they heard something." "Like what?" "I don't know. A loud noise? Something that startled them. If they were startled, they'd run or panic. They wouldn't freeze." She didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I. I saved the clip and sent it to Elliot with a text. "Check this out. Let me know what you think." He called me 10 minutes later. "What the hell was that?" he asked. "That's what I want to know. You ever see cows do that?" "No, never. That's not normal animal behavior." "You were in the barn this morning. Did you notice anything else? Anything out of place?" There was a pause. "Now that you mention it, yeah. The air smelled weird." "Weird how?" "I don't know. Clean, I guess. Like after a thunderstorm, but there wasn't a storm last night." I knew the smell he was talking about. Ozone, sharp and metallic. It's what the air smells like when lightning is close. But he was right, there hadn't been any weather. The night had been clear. "I'm going to check the other footage," I said. "See if there's anything else. Let me know what you find." I spent the next hour going through the recordings from all 4 cameras. The equipment shed camera showed nothing unusual. The driveway camera showed nothing. But the south pasture camera, which faces east toward the horizon, showed something I couldn't explain. At 2:14:58, just 2 seconds before the cows froze, a thin line appeared in the sky. It was silver, reflective, and perfectly straight. It stretched from the southern horizon to almost directly overhead, like someone had drawn a line across the sky with a ruler and a piece of polished metal. It stayed there for exactly 9 seconds, then vanished. I rewound and watched it again. The line appeared, held steady, and disappeared at the exact moments the cows stopped and started moving. I zoomed in as much as the camera would allow, but the resolution wasn't good enough to show detail. It was just a line, thin, bright, and perfectly straight. I called Elliot back. "Did you see anything in the sky last night?" I asked. "I wasn't outside last night." "No, I mean this morning, when you got here. Did you look up, notice anything unusual?" "Like what?" "I don't know, a contrail, a reflection, anything metallic?" "No. The sky was clear when I pulled in. Why?" "I found something on the south pasture camera. A line in the sky right when the cows froze." "A line?" "Yeah, silver, straight as an arrow. It was there for 9 seconds, then it was gone." Elliot was quiet for a moment. "You think it's connected?" "I don't know what else it could be. Send me the clip." I did. 5 minutes later, he called back. "Tommy, that's not a contrail. Contrails don't appear and disappear like that, and they're not that straight." "Then what is it?" "I have no idea, but I think you should save all that footage. Something weird happened last night." I saved everything. The barn footage, the pasture footage, all of it. Then I went back to the barn to check on the herd. They were grazing in the south pasture, calm and normal. I stood at the fence and watched them for a while, trying to see if any of them were acting strange. They weren't. Whatever had happened, they seemed fine now. But I wasn't fine. That footage bothered me. 9 seconds of frozen animals. A silver line in the sky. The smell of ozone in the barn. None of it made sense, and I'm the kind of person who needs things to make sense. I farm because it's logical. You plant seeds, they grow, you harvest, you feed cows, they produce milk. Cause and effect. But this didn't fit into any framework I understood. I decided to check the timestamps more carefully. I went back inside, opened the app, and pulled up the barn footage again. I watched the 9-second freeze, then kept the video running. The cows moved normally for a few minutes. Then, at 2:18:15, the camera went black. Not static, not a glitch, just black, like someone had turned it off. I checked the timestamp. It stayed black for exactly 3 minutes. Then, at 2:21:15, the feed came back. The cows were in the same positions, doing the same things. Nothing had changed except the time. I felt a chill run down my spine. 3 minutes of missing footage. The camera system doesn't do that. It's hardwired, battery-backed, and designed to run continuously unless it's physically disconnected. And even if it was disconnected, it would show a gap in the recording with a note about signal loss. This didn't show a gap. It showed 3 continuous minutes of black screen with a running timestamp. I checked the other cameras. Same thing. All 4 cameras went black at 2:18:15 and came back at 2:21:15. 3 minutes of nothing. But here's the part that made my hands shake. When the cameras came back on, the timestamp didn't match. The system clock showed 2:21:15, but according to my phone, the actual time was 2:24:15. 3 minutes had passed in real time, but the camera system had only recorded 3 minutes of blackness. Somehow, the system had lost 3 minutes and didn't know it. I called Elliot again. "You need to come back out here." "What's wrong?" "The cameras went dark last night for 3 minutes, but the timestamps don't line up. I think we lost time." "Lost time?" "Yeah, 3 minutes. It's on the footage. I'll be there in 20. He arrived in 15. I showed him the recordings, walking him through the timeline. The 9-second freeze at 2:15, the silver line in the sky, the 3 minutes of black screen, and the timestamp discrepancy. Elliot watched in silence, his jaw tight. When I finished, he looked at me. "You backed this up, right?" "Yeah. Cloud storage and a local drive." "Good, because if you tell anyone about this, they're going to say your system malfunctioned." I thought about that, but all 4 cameras went dark at the exact same time, and they all came back at the exact same time. That's not a malfunction. That's deliberate. Deliberate how? I don't know, but something made them shut down, and something made the cows freeze, and something put that line in the sky. Elliot leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face. You ever heard of anything like this? No, you? No. We sat there for a while, neither of us saying much. Finally, Elliot stood up. I'm going to check the barn again, top to bottom. If something was in there, maybe it left a mark. Like what? I don't know, but I'll know it if I see it. We walked out to the barn together. The herd was still in the pasture and the building was empty. Elliot started at the north end and worked his way south, checking every stall, every fixture, every corner. I followed behind him, looking for anything out of place. We didn't find much, but near the center of the barn, in the aisle between the stalls, there was a patch of concrete that looked different. It was cleaner than the surrounding floor. Not scrubbed clean, just clean, like someone had wiped it down. And in the center of the patch, there was a faint circular mark. Maybe 2 feet in diameter. It wasn't burned or melted. It was just there, a subtle difference in color, like the concrete had been bleached. Elliot crouched down and ran his hand over it. You ever seen this before? No. It's warm. What? The concrete. It's warm. Feel it. I knelt down and touched the mark. He was right. It was warmer than the surrounding floor. Not hot, but noticeably warmer. Like something had been sitting there recently. What the hell is this? I asked. I don't know. But it wasn't here yesterday. I would have noticed. We stared at the mark for a long time, neither of us wanting to say what we were both thinking. Something had been in the barn last night. Something that made the cows freeze, shut down the cameras, and left a warm mark on the floor. And we had no idea what it was. I took pictures of the mark from every angle. Then I grabbed a thermometer from the milk house and measured the temperature of the concrete. The mark was 78 degrees. The surrounding floor was 62. That's a 16-degree difference with no obvious heat source. Should we call someone? Elliot asked. Like who? I don't know. The sheriff? The extension office? And tell them what? We found a warm spot on the floor and our cows froze for 9 seconds? They'll think we're crazy. Maybe we are crazy. You saw the footage. You felt the floor. We're not crazy. Elliot nodded, but he didn't look convinced. I didn't blame him. I wasn't convinced either. I wanted there to be a rational explanation. A gas leak, an electrical surge. Something mechanical that I could fix or replace. But the more I looked at the evidence, the less sense it made. I decided to check the property. If something had landed in the barn, and I wasn't ready to say that's what happened, but if it had, then maybe it left marks outside too. Elliot and I walked the perimeter of the barn, scanning the ground for impressions, burn marks. Anything unusual, we didn't find anything. The grass was normal, the dirt was undisturbed. No tracks, no depressions, no scorched earth. But when we reached the southeast corner of the property near the tree line that separates my land from the Hendersons' place, Elliot stopped and pointed up. You see that? I looked. 3 crows were sitting in the top branches of an old cottonwood, absolutely still, not preening, not calling, just sitting there like statues. So, watch. We stood there for a full minute. The crows didn't move, not once. Then, all at the same time, they launched off the branch and flew west, their wings beating in perfect unison. They did what the cows did, Elliot said quietly. Maybe they were resting. Birds don't rest like that, not 3 of them at once, not without moving. He was right. I've seen plenty of crows in my life, and they're always moving, always twitching or adjusting or watching for threats. These had been frozen, just like the cows. We walked back to the barn in silence. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to think. All I knew was that something had happened on my property, and it was bigger than a warm spot on the floor or a glitch in the camera system. When we got back, I called Karen and told her I'd be late for lunch. Then I sat down at my desk in the barn office and started going through the footage again, frame by frame. I was looking for something I'd missed. A shadow, a reflection, anything that might explain what happened. At 2:14:55, 3 seconds before the cows froze, I saw it, a flicker in the upper right corner of the barn camera frame. It lasted maybe 2 frames, less than 1/10 of a second. I rewound and played it in slow motion. The flicker resolved into a shape, oval, smooth, reflective. It moved across the top of the frame from right to left, then disappeared. I zoomed in as much as the software would allow. The shape was blurry, but I could make out a surface that looked metallic. No wings, no visible propulsion, just a smooth oval moving faster than anything I'd ever seen. I saved the frame and sent it to Elliot. "What am I looking at?" he texted back. "I don't know, but it was in the barn right before everything stopped. That's not a bird, I know. That's not a plane either, I know. Tommy, what the hell is going on?" I didn't answer. I didn't have an answer. I just kept staring at the frame, at that blurry metallic oval, trying to make sense of it. It wasn't a drone. I've seen drones. They have rotors, lights, visible structure. This had none of that. It was just smooth and fast and wrong. That evening, I drove into town to talk to Walter Sims, the local veterinarian. Walter's been around longer than anyone I know, and he's seen just about everything when it comes to livestock. I figured if anyone could explain why my cows froze, it would be him. I found him at his clinic, closing up for the day. He's a big man, early 70s, with a handlebar mustache and a slow, deliberate way of speaking. I showed him the footage on my phone. He watched it twice, then handed the phone back. "Never seen that before," he said. "What could cause it?" "Honestly, I don't know. Seizures can make animals freeze, but not all of them at once, and not for the same duration. This looks coordinated." "Coordinated how?" "Like something external triggered it. A sound, maybe. Something ultrasonic that they all heard at the same time." "Would that make them freeze?" "It's possible. Some frequencies can disorient animals, but 9 seconds is a long time, and they'd show signs of distress afterward." "You said they were fine this morning?" "Completely normal." Walter frowned. "Then I don't know what to tell you. Maybe it was a neurological event. Maybe it was environmental. But without examining the animals, I can't say for sure." "Would you be willing to come out and check them?" "I can do that. But I'll be honest with you, Tommy. If they're acting normal now, I probably won't find anything. I'd still appreciate it. I'll stop by tomorrow afternoon." I thanked him and drove home. Karen had dinner waiting, but I wasn't hungry. I pushed the food around my plate and tried to focus on the conversation, but my mind kept going back to that footage. The frozen cows, the silver line, the missing 3 minutes. "You okay?" Karen asked. "Yeah, just tired." "You've been looking at that footage all day. You need to take a break." "I will. After I figure out what happened." "What if you can't figure it out?" I didn't have an answer for that. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, replaying the footage in my head. Around midnight, I got up and went to the window. The barn was dark except for the security lights mounted on the corners. The pasture beyond was quiet. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there. Watching. waiting. I went downstairs, made a pot of coffee, and opened my laptop. I started searching for similar incidents. Cows freezing in place, livestock behavior anomaly, missing time on security cameras. Most of what I found was junk, conspiracy theories, blurry photos, stories that didn't hold up under scrutiny. But buried in a forum for livestock farmers, I found a post from 2019. A rancher in Nebraska described an incident where his entire herd of cattle had stopped moving for several seconds during the night. He'd been out checking on a pregnant cow and saw it happen with his own eyes. One moment they were grazing, the next they were frozen. Then, just as suddenly, they went back to normal. He said the air had smelled like ozone, and his phone had stopped working for about 5 minutes. I read the post 3 times. The details matched. The freezing, the ozone smell, the equipment failure. I checked the date of the post, August 14th, 2019. 4 years ago. And no one had replied. No one had offered an explanation. The thread had just died. I kept searching. I found 2 more posts, one from a farmer in Oklahoma and one from a rancher in Colorado. Both described similar events. Frozen animals, strange smells, equipment failures, and in one case missing time on a security system. I was starting to see a pattern. This wasn't just happening to me, it was happening to others. Spread out over years and across multiple states. But nobody was talking about it, at least not publicly. I saved the posts and closed the laptop. It was almost 2 a.m. I thought about going back to bed, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. Instead, I grabbed a flashlight and walked out to the barn. The night was cold, and my breath misted in the air. The security lights cast long shadows across the ground, and I could hear the low murmur of the cows inside. I unlocked the side door and stepped in. Everything was quiet. The cows were resting, most of them lying down, a few standing with their eyes half closed. I walked down the center aisle, shining my flashlight on the floor. The warm mark was still there, faint but visible. I knelt down and touched it. Still warm. I don't know what made me look up. Maybe a sound, maybe just instinct. But when I did, I saw something in the rafters. A light. Small, no bigger than a marble, hovering near the peak of the roof. It was pale blue, steady, not flickering. I stared at it for a long moment, waiting for my eyes to adjust, trying to convince myself it was a reflection, or a firefly, or something normal. It moved, not fast, slowly, deliberately, drifting from one side of the barn to the other. I tracked it with my flashlight, but the beam didn't reach that high. The light passed over the cows, and as it did, their ears twitched. Not in alarm, more like recognition. Then it stopped, right above the warm mark on the floor. It hovered there for maybe 10 seconds, then blinked out. Just gone. I stood there in the dark, heart pounding, flashlight shaking in my hand. I wanted to run. I wanted to get out of the barn and never come back, but I forced myself to stay, to think, to breathe. Whatever that light was, it had been in the barn. And if it had been there just now, it might have been there last night. It might have been what the camera caught in that split-second flicker. I backed out of the barn slowly, keeping my eyes on the rafters. Nothing else moved. No more lights. No sounds except the cows. When I reached the door, I locked it behind me and walked back to the house. Karen was awake when I came in. "Where were you?" "The barn. I thought I heard something." "Did you?" "Yeah." "What was it?" I didn't answer. I just sat down at the kitchen table and put my head in my hands. She came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Tommy, talk to me. What's going on?" "I don't know, but something's in the barn, something that doesn't belong." "What do you mean?" "I mean I just saw a light, up in the rafters. It moved. It stopped right over the mark on the floor, and then it disappeared. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "We should call someone." "Who? The sheriff? What am I going to tell him? I saw a light in my barn." "Then call Elliot. Call Walter. Call someone who can help." "I will, in the morning. Right now, I just need to think." I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, going through the footage again, looking for more lights. I found two, both in the rafters, both moving the same way, slow and deliberate, both appearing in the frames right before the cows froze. By the time the sun came up, I had a working theory. The lights were drones, small, quiet, equipped with some kind of frequency generator that could immobilize animals. Someone was testing them on my property, and the camera system had caught them. It wasn't a good theory, it had holes, but it was better than the alternative, because the alternative was something I wasn't ready to accept. Elliot arrived at 6:30 for the morning milking. I showed him the new footage, the lights in the rafters. He watched in silence, then looked at me. "You saw one last night?" "Yeah, in person. It was real." "What do you think it is?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." Walter Sims came out that afternoon as promised. He spent 2 hours examining the herd, checking vitals, drawing blood samples, looking for any sign of neurological damage or distress. When he finished, he came to the house and sat down across from me at the kitchen table. "Your cows are fine," he said. "Healthiest herd I've seen all month." "No explanation for why they froze?" "None that I can find. Blood work will take a few days, but I don't expect it to show anything. Whatever happened, it didn't leave a physical mark." I showed him the lights in the footage. He leaned in close, squinting at the screen, then sat back. "That's not a bird. That's not a bat. I don't know what that is." "Could it be a drone?" "Could be. But I've never seen a drone that small move that smoothly. And why would someone fly a drone in your barn in the middle of the night?" That's what I've been trying to figure out. Walter rubbed his jaw, thinking. "You filed a report with the sheriff?" "Not yet. You should. Even if you don't know what it is, it's trespassing at the very least. And if they don't believe me, then you've got footage. That's more than most people have." He was right. I called the Stevens County Sheriff's Office after Walter left and spoke to a deputy named Travis Holbrook. I explained the situation. Frozen cows, missing camera time, lights in the barn. I tried to keep my tone level, factual, but I could tell from the pauses on the other end of the line that he thought I was wasting his time. "You're saying your cows stopped moving for 9 seconds?" "Yes." "And your cameras went dark for 3 minutes?" "Yes." "And you saw lights in your barn?" "Yes." There was another pause. "Mr. Delroy, I'll send someone out to take a look, but I have to be honest, this sounds like an equipment malfunction." "It's not an equipment malfunction. I have the footage backed up in 3 places." "All right. I'll have a deputy swing by tomorrow." He hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand, feeling the weight of his skepticism through the line. I knew how it sounded. I knew how I'd react if someone called me with the same story. But the footage didn't lie. Something had happened. The next morning, Deputy Holbrook came out himself. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with a buzz cut and the kind of body language that said he'd rather be somewhere else. I walked him through everything. The timeline, the footage, the warm mark on the floor. He took notes, but I could see he wasn't convinced. "Can I see the cameras?" he asked. I showed him the system. He checked the connections, looked at the settings, reviewed the footage. When he finished, he closed the app and handed my phone back. "Mr. Delroy, I'm not seeing anything that suggests foul play. The cameras could have glitched, the cows could have reacted to a loud noise, and the mark on the floor could be from anything. A spill, a dropped tool, heat from the sun coming through the roof. In September? At 2 in the morning? I'm just saying, there are explanations that don't involve whatever you think this is. I'm not saying I know what it is. I'm saying something happened that I can't explain, and I'm asking for help figuring it out. Deputy Holbrook softened a little. Look, I'll file a report. If you see anything else, lights, drones, whatever, call us right away. We'll send someone out, but without physical evidence or a witness who can corroborate your account, there's not much we can do. Elliot saw the footage. He saw the mark. That's not the same as seeing the event happen. You understand that, right? I understood. He left shortly after, and I watched his cruiser disappear down the driveway. I felt deflated. I'd expected skepticism, but part of me had hoped that someone in authority would take it seriously, that someone would care. Elliot found me in the barn an hour later, staring at the mark on the floor. Deputy leave? Yeah. What did he say? He said it's probably nothing. Elliot didn't respond. He just stood next to me, looking at the same spot I was looking at. After a while, he said, "You believe me, right? About what I saw that morning? The silver line, yeah. I believe you. Good, because I've been thinking about it. And I think I saw it before." I turned to face him. "What do you mean?" "About 2 months ago, late July, I was driving home from town around midnight and I saw something in the sky. A line, just like the one in the footage. I thought it was a shooting star, so I didn't think much of it. But now I'm not so sure." "Where were you when you saw it?" "South of here, near the Henderson place." That was less than 2 miles away. "Did it move?" "No, it was just there for a few seconds. Then it was gone." I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. "Do you remember the exact date?" "Not the date, but it was a Friday night. I remember because I'd been at the co-op picking up feed, and they close at 10 on Fridays." I checked the calendar. July had 5 Fridays. If Elliot left town around 10:15, he would have been on the road by 10:30. That gave me a window to check. "I'm going to look through the footage from July," I said. "See if the cameras caught anything." Elliot nodded. "You want help?" "No. This is going to take a while. I'll let you know if I find anything." I spent the rest of the day going through 2 months of archived footage. It was tedious work, scanning through hours of empty frames, looking for anomalies. But around 8:00 p.m., I found something. July 28th. 10:40 p.m., the south pasture camera showed a thin silver line in the sky, identical to the one from September. It appeared at 10:47:33, held for 11 seconds, then vanished at 10:47:44. I checked the barn camera from the same timestamp. The cows were outside in the pasture that night, and at 10:47:35 they all stopped moving. For 11 seconds, then they started again. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. It had happened before, 2 months earlier. And I hadn't noticed because I hadn't been looking. I kept searching. I went back further, all the way to June, and I found it again. June 15th, 11:22 p.m. Silver line in the sky. Cows frozen for 8 seconds, same pattern. I called Elliot. "It's happened at least 3 times, I said. June, July, and September. Same thing every time. Jesus, why didn't we notice? Because we weren't looking, and because the cows didn't show any lasting effects. If I hadn't gotten that motion alert in September, I probably wouldn't have checked the footage at all. So what do we do? I don't know, but I'm going to document everything. Every incident, every detail. And if it happens again, I'll be ready." "Ready how?" "I'm setting up more cameras. I'm I'm going to cover every angle of this property. If something comes back, I'll have proof that can't be dismissed. Over the next 2 weeks, I installed 6 additional cameras. I covered the barn from every direction, the pastures, the driveway, even the tree line. I upgraded to higher resolution models with better night vision. I set up motion alerts on my phone for every camera, and I stayed up late every night watching the feeds, waiting. Nothing happened. The cows were fine. The cameras recorded nothing unusual. The only lights in the barn were the ones I'd installed myself. Part of me was relieved. Part of me was frustrated. I wanted answers. I wanted to see it again so I could prove it was real. Then, on October 12th, it happened again. I was in the house watching TV with Karen when my phone buzzed. Motion alert, main barn. I grabbed the phone and pulled up the live feed. The cows were standing in their stalls, calm and still. Too still. "It's happening again," I said. Karen looked at me. "What?" "The cows, they're freezing." I watched the feed. For 13 seconds, not a single animal moved. Then they all started at once. I switched to the south pasture camera and scanned the sky. There, a silver line, thicker this time, running from east to west. It held for the same 13 seconds, then vanished. "Did you see that?" I asked Karen. She was looking over my shoulder at the screen. "I saw something. What was it?" "I don't know, but I'm going out there." "Tommy, wait." I was already out the door. I grabbed a flashlight and ran to the barn. The night was cool and still, and I could hear the cows moving inside, back to normal. I unlocked the side door and stepped in. The air smelled like ozone again, sharp and clean. I shined my flashlight around the barn, looking for lights in the rafters. Nothing. I walked to the center aisle and checked the floor. The worm mark was back. Larger this time, maybe 3 feet across. I knelt down and touched it. Hot. Almost too hot to touch. I pulled out my phone and took pictures, then called Elliot. He didn't answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I sent him a text. "It happened again. Get out here." I stayed in the barn, waiting, watching the rafters. The cows were calm now, chewing their cud, acting like nothing had happened. But I knew. I'd seen it on the cameras. I'd felt the heat on the floor. It was real. Elliot arrived 20 minutes later, breathless. I was in the shower. What happened? Same thing. 13 seconds this time. The line was bigger, and the mark on the floor is hot. He touched the floor and jerked his hand back. Jesus, what is this? I don't know. But I got it all on camera. Multiple angles, high resolution, everything. We spent the next hour reviewing the footage. The barn cameras showed the cows freezing. The pasture camera showed the silver line. And one of the new cameras, mounted high on the east wall, caught something else. At 10:34:17, just before the cows froze, a shape descended from the roof. It was small, oval, metallic. It hovered for a moment near the center aisle, then dropped lower. At 10:34:20, it emitted a pulse of light, brief, white, intense, and the cows froze. The shape held its position for 13 seconds, then ascended back toward the roof and disappeared. I replayed the clip 5 times. Each time, the details were the same. The shape, the pulse, the perfect timing. "That's not a drone," Elliot said quietly. "No, it's not." "Then what is it?" "I don't know, but it's been coming here for months, and I think it's studying the cows." "Studying them how?" "I don't know, but every time it shows up, it does the same thing. It freezes them, it emits a pulse, and it leaves a mark. That's not random, that's deliberate." Elliot stared at the screen. We need to show this to someone. Who? The sheriff doesn't care. Walter doesn't have an explanation. Who's going to believe us? I don't know. But we can't just sit on this. He was right. The next morning, I burned copies of the footage onto 3 USB drives. I mailed one to Dr. Alan Brenner, the physicist from Colorado State that Bo Rankin had mentioned in his report. I'd found his contact information online and sent him a brief message explaining what I'd captured. I mailed the second drive to a researcher at Kansas State University who specialized in animal behavior, and I kept the third drive in a safe deposit box at the bank in Hugoton. Dr. Brenner responded 2 days later. He called me directly. Mr. Delroy, I've reviewed your footage. It's remarkable. Do you know what it is? No, but I can tell you what it's consistent with. There have been reports of similar phenomena across the Midwest for decades. Objects that appear and disappear, pulses of light, animals that freeze in place. Your footage is some of the clearest documentation I've seen. Can you explain the mark on the floor? Not definitively, but if the object emitted some form of electromagnetic pulse, it could have heated the concrete. The fact that it's circular and centered suggests the source was directly above it. So it's real, what I saw. Yes, it's real, and you're not the only one seeing it. That gave me some comfort, but not much. I wanted to know why. Why my barn? Why my cows? Why multiple times over 4 months? Dr. Brenner didn't have answers. He said he'd share my footage with colleagues who might have insights, but he warned me not to expect quick results. This is uncharted territory, he said. We're all trying to figure it out. The researcher from Kansas State never responded. Over the next month, I became obsessed with the cameras. I checked them constantly, day and night, looking for signs of the object. I set up a cot in the barn office so I could sleep close to the herd. Karen tried to talk me out of it, but I couldn't let it go. I needed to see it again. I needed to understand. On November 18th, it came back. This time, I was in the barn when it happened. I was sitting in the office, watching the live feeds on my laptop, when the air pressure changed. I felt it in my ears, like I was descending in an airplane. Then the smell hit me. Ozone, strong and immediate. I stood up and walked into the main barn. The cows were frozen, all of them. Mid-chew, mid-shift, perfectly still. I looked up at the rafters and saw it. The small oval shape, hovering about 20 feet above the center aisle. It was darker than the footage showed, almost black, with a faint glow along its edges. I pulled out my phone and started recording. My hands were shaking, but I kept the camera steady. The object emitted a pulse, white light, bright enough to make me squint. The pulse lasted maybe 2 seconds, then faded. The object held its position for another 10 seconds, then rose toward the roof and vanished through the peak like it was passing through a curtain. The cows started moving again. I stood there, phone still recording, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I'd seen it, in person, no camera between me and the object. It was real. I backed out of the barn slowly, keeping my phone aimed at the rafters. When I reached the office, I saved the video and sent it to Dr. Brenner immediately. Then I called Elliot. I saw it, I said. I was in the barn. I saw the whole thing. You're sure? I'm sure. I recorded it. I have video. I'm coming over. He arrived within the hour. We watched the video together, frame by frame. The object was clear. The pulse was clear. There was no mistaking what it was. What do we do now? Elliot asked. We keep documenting, we keep watching, and we hope someone with answers finds us before this thing decides to do more than study the cows. That was 3 months ago. The object hasn't returned since. The cameras haven't caught anything unusual. The cows are fine, but I'm still waiting, still watching, still checking the feeds every night. But the silence didn't last. In late November, things changed again. It started with the Henderson place. My neighbor to the east, Roy Henderson, called me on a Wednesday morning. He's 72, been farming longer than I've been alive, and he's not the type to get rattled. But his voice on the phone was tight. "Tommy, you been having trouble with your herd?" "What kind of trouble?" "Strange behavior, bunching up, acting spooked for no reason." "Not lately. Why?" "Mine are. Started 2 nights ago. They won't go into the north pasture. I tried moving them there yesterday, and they just stopped at the gate. Wouldn't budge. I've never seen them do that." "Any predators around? Coyotes?" "Checked for that. No tracks, no scat, nothing. But there's a smell out there." "What kind of smell?" "Clean, like after lightning. You know what I mean?" I knew exactly what he meant. "I'll come take a look." I drove over that afternoon. Roy met me at his barn, and we walked out to the north pasture together. The cows were in the south pasture, clustered near the fence line, watching us. Roy opened the gate to the north pasture and walked in. I followed. The smell hit me immediately. Ozone, sharp and metallic, stronger than what I'd smelled in my own barn. I looked around. The grass was normal. No burn marks, no tracks. But near the center of the pasture there was a circular patch where the grass looked flattened. Not trampled, pressed, like something heavy had rested there. I knelt down and ran my hand over the grass. It was warm. The surrounding ground was cold. It was late November after all, but the circle was warm to the touch. "You see this?" I asked Roy. He nodded. "Found it this morning." "What do you think did it?" "I don't know, but I've seen something similar on my property." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're not the only one experiencing strange things, and I think whatever's happening to me is happening to you too." I told Roy everything. The frozen cows, the camera footage, the lights in the barn, the silver line in the sky. He listened without interrupting, his face getting more serious with each detail. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked when I finished. "Because I thought you'd think I was crazy." "Hell, I thought I was crazy. You're not crazy. I've seen things too. Not like what you're describing, but strange lights. Years ago, I never told anyone because, well, for the same reason you didn't." "What did you see?" "Back in the 80s. I was out checking fence line one night and I saw 3 lights moving across the sky. Triangle formation. No sound. They stopped right over my property, hung there for maybe a minute, then shot straight up and disappeared. Scared the hell out of me." "Did anything happen afterward?" "Cattle were spooked for a week. Wouldn't go near the spot where I'd been standing, and the grass there turned brown. Died completely. Took 2 years before anything would grow there again." I felt a chill run through me. "Roy, I need to set up cameras on your property, with your permission." "You think it's going to come back?" "I think it already has, and I want to be ready when it does." Roy agreed. That evening, Elliot and I installed 2 cameras on Roy's property, one aimed at the north pasture, one at the barn. I linked them to my monitoring system and set up motion alerts. Then we waited. 3 days later, at 1:47 a.m., both cameras at Roy's place triggered simultaneously. I was asleep when my phone started buzzing. I grabbed it and pulled up the feeds. The north pasture camera showed Roy's cattle frozen in place. The barn camera showed the same, and in the sky above the north pasture there was a silver line, thicker than before, almost glowing. I called Roy immediately. "It's happening. Right now, at your place." "I'm looking out the window. I don't see anything." Check the north pasture. I heard him moving. Boots on wood floor, a door opening. Then, Jesus Christ! You see it? I see. I don't know what I'm seeing. There's a light. Over the pasture, it's just hanging there. Stay inside. I'm coming over. I threw on clothes and ran to my truck. Elliot was already pulling up in his own vehicle. I'd added him to the alert system. We drove to Roy's place together, covering the 2 miles in under 3 minutes. When we pulled into his driveway, Roy was standing on his porch with a rifle across his arms. "It's still out there," he said, pointing toward the north pasture. I looked. The silver line had expanded into a wide oval of pale light, hovering maybe 100 feet above the ground. It wasn't moving, just hanging there, steady and silent. Below it, Roy's cattle stood frozen, 40 head of Angus locked in place like statues. "We need to get closer," I said. "The hell we do," Roy shot back. "I need to document this. Multiple witnesses, multiple cameras. This is bigger than my barn." Elliot grabbed his phone. "I'm recording." We walked toward the pasture, staying together, keeping our distance from the light. As we got closer, I felt the now familiar pressure in my chest. That low hum, the sensation of air thickening. Elliot felt it too. I saw him press a hand to his ribs. "You feel that?" he asked. "Yeah." Roy stayed at the fence line, rifle still in hand. Elliot and I moved to within 50 yards of the cattle. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The light above pulsed once, a brief flare that made the ground beneath it glow orange. The cattle didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, frozen in the middle of their pasture. Then the light began to descend, slowly, carefully, lowering itself toward the ground. As it dropped, I could see it more clearly. It wasn't just light, there was structure behind it. A dark shape, oval, smooth, with the light emanating from its underside. "Back up," I said to Elliot. We retreated toward the fence. Roy was already moving toward his truck. The object descended to within 20 feet of the ground, hovered there for a moment, then emitted another pulse. This one was brighter, more intense. I had to shield my eyes. When I lowered my hand, the object was rising, fast. It shot straight up, faster than anything I'd ever seen, and disappeared into the night sky. The cattle started moving again, all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. We stood there in silence for a long moment. Then Roy said, "You got that on camera?" "Every second." "Good, because nobody's going to believe this." The next morning, I compiled footage from 6 different cameras. My barn cameras, the pasture cameras, and the 2 at Roy's place. I had multiple angles of the same event. The frozen cattle, the silver line expanding into an oval, the object descending, the pulse. All of it documented from multiple perspectives. I sent the footage to Dr. Brenner with a detailed timeline. He called me that afternoon. "Mr. Delroy, this is extraordinary. You have multiple witnesses. 3 of us. Me, my hired hand Elliot, and my neighbor Roy Henderson. We all saw it. We all recorded it. And the object descended to within 20 feet? Yes, close enough to see structure. It was solid, not just light." Dr. Brenner was quiet for a moment. "I need to bring colleagues in on this. Physicists, engineers, people who can analyze what you've captured. Are you willing to share this footage more widely? Will it help get answers? It might, but I can't promise anything. This is unprecedented. Do what you need to do. I just want to know what we're dealing with." Over the next 2 weeks, Dr. Brenner shared the footage with a small group of researchers. I started getting emails, questions about the timeline, the location, the behavior of the cattle. One researcher, a physicist from MIT, asked about electromagnetic readings. I didn't have any. I wasn't equipped to measure that. But he suggested I invest in an EMF detector if the object returned. I bought 3 of them. Industrial grade, designed for electrical work. I set them up around my barn and gave one to Roy for his pasture. They'd log any electromagnetic spikes automatically. On December 8th, I got a visit from someone unexpected. A man in his 40s, dressed in a dark suit, no tie, driving a black sedan with government plates. He knocked on my door around 10 o'clock a.m. and introduced himself as Agent Marcus Ashford with the Department of Defense. Mr. Delroy, I understand you've been documenting unusual aerial phenomena on your property. I didn't invite him in. Who told you that? We monitor certain research channels. Your footage came to our attention. I'd like to discuss it. You with the Air Force? I'm with a division that investigates incidents like yours. I'm not here to dismiss what you've seen. I'm here to understand it. I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table, and I showed him the footage. All of it. He watched without expression, taking notes on a small tablet. When I finished, he sat back and folded his hands. Mr. Delroy, what you've captured is consistent with reports we've received from other locations. Not many, but enough to establish a pattern. What kind of pattern? Objects that appear over agricultural land. Animals that exhibit synchronized behavior. Missing time on recording systems. Physical traces on the ground. You're not the first to document this. Then what is it? We don't know, but we're working to find out. In the meantime, I need to ask you not to distribute this footage publicly. Why? Because it raises questions we're not prepared to answer, and because public panic doesn't help anyone. I'm not trying to cause panic. I'm trying to understand what's happening on my property. I understand, and we're going to help you, but we need your cooperation. What does that mean? It means if the object returns, you contact me immediately, before anyone else. We'll send a team to document it properly. In exchange, we'll share our findings with you. I didn't like the sound of that. It felt like control, like someone trying to manage information. But I also didn't have better options. The sheriff wasn't interested. The researchers were scattered and underfunded. This was the first person with resources who was taking me seriously. All right, I said, but I'm keeping copies of everything. And if you try to confiscate my equipment or intimidate me, this footage goes public. Agent Ashford smiled. Fair enough, you have my word. We're not here to silence you. We're here to learn. He left his card and drove away. I stood on the porch watching his sedan disappear down the road, wondering if I'd just made a deal with the devil, or someone who could actually help. The object didn't return in December, or January. The cameras ran continuously. The EMF detectors logged nothing unusual, and the cattle behaved normally. I started to think maybe it was over, that whatever cycle the object was on had moved elsewhere. Then, on February 3rd, at 3:22 a.m., every alert I had went off at once. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Barn cameras, pasture cameras, Roy's cameras, EMF detectors spiking to levels I'd never seen. I grabbed my phone and checked the feeds. It wasn't just one object this time. There were three oval shapes hovering above my barn, arranged in a triangle formation. Each one emitting that pale glow I'd come to recognize. The cattle in the barn were frozen. The cattle in Roy's pasture were frozen. And the EMF readings were off the charts, over 500 milligauss in my barn alone. I called Agent Ashford. He answered on the first ring. It's happening. 3 objects. Right now. Stay inside. We have a team in the area. They'll be there in 15 minutes. 15 minutes? Where are they? Close. Just stay inside. I didn't stay inside. I grabbed Elliot's number and called him. He was already awake, watching his own phone light up with alerts. "I'm coming over," he said. Roy called next. "Tommy, you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it. Stay put. Help's coming." "What kind of help?" "Government. DOD. Jesus Christ." Elliot arrived first. We stood in my driveway looking up at the three objects hovering above the barn. They weren't moving, just holding position. Glowing. Silent. The pressure in my chest was stronger than I'd ever felt. My teeth ached. My vision blurred at the edges. "We should get back," Elliot said. "Not yet. I need to see this." Then we heard it. A low rumble, growing louder. Helicopter. No, multiple helicopters. 2 Blackhawks appeared over the tree line, flying low and fast. They circled the property once, then landed in my south pasture. 6 men in tactical gear poured out, carrying equipment I didn't recognize. Agent Ashford emerged from the second helicopter and jogged over to us. "Mr. Delroy, we need you and your colleague to move to a safe distance. This is my property. I understand, but those objects could become unstable. Please." Reluctantly, I backed up toward the house. The team spread out across the property, setting up what looked like sensors and cameras. One of them aimed a handheld device at the barn and started taking readings. "EMF is at 600 and climbing," he called out. "Deploy countermeasures," Ashford ordered. One of the team members activated a piece of equipment that emitted a high-pitched whine. Immediately, the 3 objects began to rise. Not fast, but steady. They climbed together, maintaining their triangle formation, until they were several hundred feet up. Then they accelerated. In less than 2 seconds, they were gone. Just vanished into the night sky. The team kept working, collecting samples from the ground where the objects had hovered, scanning the barn, documenting everything. Ashford walked over to me. "Thank you for calling us. What the hell was that?" "I can't say for certain, but whatever they are, they respond to specific electromagnetic frequencies. That's the first real interaction we've had. They were here for months. Why didn't you tell me you could do that?" "Because we weren't sure it would work. And because we needed a live event to test it." I felt a surge of anger. "You used my property as bait. We used your cooperation to gather critical data. And now we know these objects can be deterred. That's progress." I wanted to argue, but I was too exhausted. The pressure in my chest was fading and my head was starting to clear. Elliot put a hand on my shoulder. "Come on, let's go inside." The team stayed until dawn, packing up their equipment and loading samples into cases. Before they left, Ashford pulled me aside. "We'll analyze everything we collected. I'll share the findings with you. You have my word. And if they come back, they might, but now we know how to respond, and so do you." He handed me a small device, about the size of a car key fob. "If you see them again, press this. It'll activate a localized deterrent field. Not as strong as what we used tonight, but enough to make them leave." I took the device and watched the helicopters lift off. Roy came over an hour later, pale and shaken. "What the hell happened?" "I don't know, but I think we're part of something bigger now. I don't know what the object is. I don't know where it comes from or what it wants. But I know it's real. I've seen it. I've recorded it. I've felt the heat it leaves behind. And I know I'm not the only one." If you're reading this because you've experienced something similar, frozen animals, missing time, silver lines in the sky, document everything. Set up cameras, take notes, and find others like me. We're out here. We've seen it. And we're trying to understand. My name is Tommy Delroy. I run a dairy farm outside Hugoton, Kansas. In September of 2023, my security cameras captured something I can't explain. An object in my barn. A pulse of light. 3 minutes of missing time. It happened again in October, and again in November, and I saw it with my own eyes. This is my account. This is my truth. I don't expect everyone to believe it. But I hope someone out there recognizes the pattern. Someone who's seen the same thing. Someone who can help us figure out what's happening. Because whatever it is, it's still out there, and I don't think it's done. I don't know what the object is. I don't know where it comes from or what it wants. But I know it's real. I've seen it. I've recorded it. I've felt the heat it leaves behind. And I know I'm not the only one. Agent Ashford kept his word. 2 weeks after the February incident, he sent me a detailed report. The objects showed characteristics unlike any known aircraft. No heat signature from propulsion. No radar return that matched conventional materials. And the electromagnetic readings suggested they were generating their own field, possibly for levitation or propulsion. The researchers weren't sure. The samples from my barn floor contained the same anomalies Dr. Brenner had found. Elevated silicon levels and trace amounts of an unidentified isotope. The government lab added one more finding. The molecular structure of the concrete had been altered at the quantum level, something that shouldn't be possible without equipment that doesn't exist. In March, I was invited to a private briefing in Kansas City. 18 other farmers and ranchers were there, all from the Midwest, all with similar experiences. We sat in a conference room with no windows and shared our stories. Frozen animals. Missing time. Silver lines in the sky, objects in barns and pastures. Every single person in that room had documented something they couldn't explain. An Air Force colonel gave a presentation. He said the phenomena had been occurring for decades, possibly longer. But documentation was sparse until recently. The proliferation of personal security cameras and smartphones had finally given them data to work with. They still didn't know what the objects were. Extraterrestrial, experimental technology from an adversarial nation, or something else entirely. But they were taking it seriously now. "You're all part of an ongoing investigation," the colonel said. "Your cooperation has been invaluable. We're asking you to continue monitoring your properties and reporting incidents. In exchange, we'll provide you with detection equipment and support." After the briefing, I talked with some of the other farmers. A woman from Nebraska had seen objects over her property 11 times in 2 years. A rancher from South Dakota had footage of his horses frozen in mid-gallop. A wheat farmer from Oklahoma had watched an object descend into his field, hover for 30 seconds, then shoot straight up through cloud cover at impossible speed. We exchanged contact information and promised to stay in touch. It felt like being part of a club nobody wanted to join, but everyone needed. I still farm. The cows still produce milk. The crops still grow. But I check the cameras every night, and I keep that deterrent device Ashford gave me on my keychain. The objects haven't come back since February, but I know they will. It's not over. Elliot quit in April. He didn't give me a reason, just said he needed a change. But I saw it in his eyes, the weight of what we'd witnessed. The way he'd started checking the sky every few minutes when we were working outside. The way he'd flinch when a plane flew overhead. He moved to Wichita, took a job at a hardware store. We don't talk much anymore. I don't blame him. Some people can carry this. Others can't. Karen worries about me. She sees the way I've changed. The way I sleep with my phone on the nightstand. Volume turned up, always listening for alerts. The way I've stopped making long-term plans, like I'm waiting for something to interrupt them. She asked me once if I regretted installing the cameras. I told her no, because not knowing would be worse than knowing. Roy still farms his land. We check in with each other every few days, compare notes, review footage. His cattle stopped acting strange after February, same as mine, but he installed motion lights around his entire property and keeps a scanner tuned to emergency frequencies. Just in case, he says. Just in case of what, neither of us wants to specify. The other farmers from the Kansas City briefing formed an informal network. We have a private message group where we share updates. Most days it's quiet, but every few weeks someone posts new footage or reports an incident. A rancher in Wyoming saw lights in March. A farmer in Iowa captured audio of a low-frequency hum that made his dogs hide. A woman in Missouri found a circular burn mark in her soybean field that wasn't there the day before. We document everything. We compare patterns. We wait. Agent Ashford calls me once a month. He says the investigation is ongoing, that they're making progress, but he can't share details yet. I've stopped asking questions. I've learned that answers come slowly in this world, if they come at all. But he did tell me one thing that stuck with me. Whatever these objects are, they've been visiting Earth for a long time. We're just now developing the tools to see them clearly. That thought keeps me up at night. How many farmers before me saw things they couldn't explain? How many wrote it off as stress or imagination? How many died without ever knowing what had visited their land? I've started keeping a journal. Not just of the incidents, but of everything. How the farm looks in different seasons. What the sky feels like on clear nights. The way the cows react when the air pressure drops before a storm. I want to leave a record. If something happens to me, if the objects come back and I don't walk away, I want there to be documentation. Evidence. Proof that I didn't imagine this. My son called last week. He's in college, studying engineering. He asked how the farm was doing. I told him fine. He asked if anything interesting had happened. I said no. I couldn't tell him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. How do you tell your child that the world is stranger than he knows? That there are things in the sky that defy physics? That his father has seen them and doesn't know if they're dangerous or just curious? Maybe when he's older. Maybe when I have better answers. For now, I keep it to myself and the small group of people who understand. In May, I attended a second briefing. This one was larger, 47 people from across the country. The Air Force colonel was there again, along with a team of scientists I didn't recognize. They showed us composite data from all our reports. Patterns emerged that I hadn't seen when I was focused only on my own property. The objects appeared most frequently between September and February, with a peak in November. They targeted properties within a specific geographical band, between the 37th and 40th parallels. They showed preference for dairy operations over other types of farms, though no one could explain why. And they returned to the same locations repeatedly, sometimes years apart, but always following the same behavioral patterns. We believe they're conducting some form of survey, one of the scientists said. The consistency suggests methodology, purpose, intelligence. A rancher from Montana asked the question we were all thinking, are they a threat? The colonel answered carefully. We haven't observed any overtly hostile behavior. No abductions, no injuries to livestock or humans, but we also can't rule out potential risks. These objects represent technology far beyond our current capabilities. Until we understand their intentions, caution is warranted. They gave us new equipment, enhanced EMF detectors, spectrographic cameras, audio recorders calibrated to capture frequencies outside normal human hearing. They asked us to deploy them and report any findings. We all agreed. What else could we do? Back home, I installed the new equipment. The spectrographic cameras revealed something the standard cameras couldn't capture. Faint traces of electromagnetic distortion lingering in the barn hours after the objects departed. The audio recorders picked up low-frequency pulses that my ears couldn't detect, but that made my chest vibrate when I played them back. I sent the data to the research team. They thanked me and said they'd incorporate it into their analysis, but I could tell from their tone that they were still fishing in the dark, same as the rest of us. In June, Roy's grandson came to visit, 10 years old, bright-eyed, full of questions. He asked Roy what the cameras were for. Roy told him they were for security. The kid asked if bad guys ever came around. Roy said no, just animals sometimes. I watched Roy's face as he lied to his grandson, and I saw the weight of it. The burden of knowing something you can't share, something that would sound crazy if you tried to explain it. Later that evening, Roy and I sat on his porch watching the sunset. He didn't say much, just stared at the horizon. Finally, he spoke. "You ever think about what this means? Really means? What do you mean?" "I mean, if these things are real, and we know they are, then everything's different. Everything we thought we understood about the universe, about being alone or not alone, all of it changes. Yeah, I think about that. It scares the hell out of me, not the objects themselves, but what it means for my grandson, for your son. What kind of world are we leaving them?" I didn't have an answer. I still don't. All I know is that we can't unknow what we've seen. We can't pretend the sky is empty when we know it isn't. And we can't stop farming, stop living, stop looking up just because something up there is looking back. The cameras are still recording. The detectors are still logging data. The network of farmers is still sharing information. And I'm still here, working the same land my grandfather worked, wondering if he ever saw what I've seen and just didn't have the tools to document it. If you're reading this because you've experienced something similar, frozen animals, missing time, silver lines in the sky, document everything. Set up cameras, take notes, and find others like me. We're out here. We've seen it, and we're trying to understand. My name is Tommy Delroy. I run a dairy farm outside Hugoton, Kansas. In September of 2023, my security cameras captured something I can't explain. An object in my barn, a pulse of light, 3 minutes of missing time. It happened again in October, November, and February. I saw it with my own eyes, multiple times. And I have proof. This is my account. This is my truth. I don't expect everyone to believe it, but I hope someone out there recognizes the pattern. Someone who's seen the same thing. Someone who can help us figure out what's happening. Because whatever it is, it's still out there. It's systematic, it's deliberate, and it's not done with us yet. The land doesn't care what we've seen. It keeps producing. The crops keep growing. The seasons keep turning. And somewhere above it all, in the clear night sky over Kansas, something is watching. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it's there, but I know it's real. And I know we're just beginning to understand the scope of it. That has to be enough for now.